This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Mr. Barr, Darken the Door, and Lisa Mateo off the beach is here as well. We say good morning, an eventful week, an eventful Monday. Paul, let me go obscure. Damien, is Damien showing up later?
I think
Is he on the date calendar?
He might be.
We're in the intervention watch in Japan. It's off the
we?
radar,
Okay.
you
All
know.
right.
But the answer is
yen, Tom, 159.51.
Yeah,
I mean,
full
wow.
intervention watch. We'll explain what it means somewhere with Damien during the show and that. But, you know, the bottom line is that's how obtuse it is. There's a lot going on. I like what you said, that we come up on the end of the second quarter.
End of the second quarter here, the SPX up north of 15%. I mean, we had that great first quarter up over 10% in the S&P. We've kind of been inching up ever since here in the second quarter. Some decent earnings. The Fed doesn't seem to be in any rush to cut rates, although the expectation is they will cut rates at some point.
Big debate over the
That's all we
weekend.
need.
A lot of people really thinking about what is this Fed going to do. We're beginning our planning for Jackson Hole. We hope to be there at the end of August. Red and green on the screen. Apple affecting the futures as well with that news. From the Interactive Broker Studios, let's get right to it. Our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We have futures mixed this morning. Traders gearing up for a week filled with politics, also inflation data on the data side this week. Let's start there. All eyes on the Federal Reserve's preferred gauge of consumer costs. We're talking about the PCE deflator that comes out on Friday. On the political side, yes, the focus will be on the first U.S. presidential debate. So right now we have NASDAQ futures down just a fraction right now at 19,975. Dow futures up 0.3%, 130 points at 39,713. S&P futures up 0.1%, 7 points at 5,541. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield 4.74%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%, and that is little changed. Boeing taking another hit. Reuters reporting prosecutors recommending criminal charges against the plane maker for violating a settlement over 2 deadly 737 MAX crashes. We have Boeing shares are little changed. And some good news for those car dealerships who use CDK Global software. The company says it began work to restore the systems. The process will take several days and not weeks. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. You know, we went into our planning meeting yesterday. I had to step away from the F1, the Barcelona, and we have a 3-hour planning meeting on Sundays, and Paul and I both agree we got to start with somebody broad, correlated, looking across equities, bonds, currency, and lumber contracts as well. Joining us now, Michael Purvis, tall back, and Michael, I got 8 ways to go here, but I'm going to go to your chart in your most recent note. Lumber has absolutely tanked. That $200 sheet of plywood Paul needs out at the beach house. I mean, it's cheaper now. Why is that?
Well, I think it comes down to one central thing here, which is that housing supply is not growing the way a lot of people would like it to. And, we just saw permits come in last week. Housing starts come in last week. And they are, making new lows at this cycle. And it's just really hard to grow housing supply here. And if that's the case, you're just going to need less lumber here. So it's we have an interesting, we have lumber deflating, but what that ultimately means is that if housing supply is not going to grow, it's going to be hard for the housing CPI to really shrink a lot. And Tom, it's the housing, the shelter component of the CPI, as we all know, it's the single biggest component. It's 43% of core CPI, and it was the last major component to peak, and it peaked at one of the highest levels. And it's disinflating at a pretty slow level here, right? And so it's hard in my mind, if housing supply is not going to really grow, it's going to be an enduring problem for the Fed there. That's one of the reasons why I highlighted in that chart, right there.
So what do you think, Michael? For the Federal Reserve, there's a lot of, I guess the camps are kind of split here. This Federal Reserve, on one hand, could just sit on its hands and just kind of let everything play out. On the other hand, a lot of folks are saying, the inflation data suggests that they should be cutting now. How do you think about this?
Look, I think there's good arguments both ways to sort of sit on their hands and do nothing, or like proactively cut because real rates may be a little bit too high and we're going to get some more disinflation, and you don't want to have real rates being too high just as the economy is slowing down there. I think that the problem here is that the reason why I'm on the Fed is probably going to end up staying where it is and just doing nothing, Paul, it comes down to a couple of things where I think they need optionality. We're in a very strange cycle. The inflation data is very complex and nuanced, and there's a lot of structural factors like we were just talking about. Shelter, being, a very resilient source of inflation there. And I think the Fed is going to be, it craves optionality. We all talk about the Fed put, in the markets, but I think the Fed, needs its own options as well, and it needs. By staying where it is, I think they're not going to shoot until they see the whites of disinflation eyes, if you will. Right?
You talk about inflation, Paul. I mean, a hitter like you's out at Jaeger Lumber in New Jersey.
Oh boy, big time.
And you look at what would be good for the Sweeney household, Michael Purvis, the Baltic birch 3/4 inch. It's not even a whole sheet of plywood, 5x5, whatever that is, $137.
Wow.
For a 5'5" Baltic birch thing. Right. I mean, there's inflation is coming down, I guess, but wow.
Well, last summer I bought enough lumber. It was probably like to build a roof for my a shed, 2 feet, basically 2 feet by 4 feet. And I spent $250 on pine. I mean, this is not like, some special hardwood or something like that. So yeah, I know lumber's been crazy high. It is the futures contracts are very low. That doesn't mean when you go into Home Depot you're going to get 80% down, but certainly the futures prices are sort of foundational to where the broader trend is there. And again, it reflects where housing supply is not just it's just not growing that much. So there, but yeah, no, I really do think that there is a getting back to Paul's point on cutting here. I think the other question I really ask for those people that are really expecting cuts in abundance this year is, if rate hikes have not hampered the economy that much on the way up, how much will rate cuts really benefit? It's the economy. We are going through some, I think, sort of a nominal GDP regime shift right now. I think the Fed is seeing that, and I think they're sort of saying, well, okay, if we do cut, let's say we do something in September and then another one in December, what does that really mean for the economy, right? Will it really have the impact? And I think there's an overarching thing that a lot of people miss out on, which is that for so many years, we used all our dry powder, right? The Fed had spent all the dry, had gone into this ultra dovish policy for so long,
right?
And I think going into the future, and we don't know who's going to be president, we don't know how loose fiscal policy is going to be over the next few years. I would think the Fed would want to go
the big thing to watch for is just what does
to reserve as much dry powder as it possibly can.
Yeah.
Given that loose fiscal policy coming out of DC.
Very quickly, are you enthusiastic about large cap U.S. big tech?
It's a boring comment, Tom, but yes, I am. I think the earnings growth is there. It's going to be a lot of back and fill, and I think the big tech will keep leading the S&P 500 higher through the year.
You buy NVIDIA and you can afford Baltic birch.
Yep.
A little bit of it. Michael Purvis, thank you so much for talking back on there. And seriously, the collapse in lumber prices as well. Green on the screen, NASDAQ a little light here, but futures up 7. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Millions of Americans are preparing to mark the 2-year anniversary of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade and putting abortion access in the national spotlight, including the former president, who appeared to take a victory lap on the campaign trail over the weekend.
Thanks to these justices, we have also achieved what the pro-life movement fought to get for 49 years. And we've gotten abortion out of the federal government and back to the states.
And while former President Donald Trump prepares for a debate with President Biden, he is in Camp David for Thursday's debate. First Lady Dr. Jill Biden was in Pittsburgh speaking at a political rally. The Biden campaign is using the second anniversary of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision overturning abortion rights as a way to highlight President Biden's record supporting reproductive rights and Trump's record appointing the court's conservative majority.
Women put Joe Biden in the White House. Hey, and women are going to keep him there.
Planned Parenthood will spend $40 million ahead of November's elections to bolster President Joe Biden, and leading congressional Democrats betting that voters angry at Republican-led efforts to further restrict access to abortion can be the difference in key races. Russian authorities say more than 15 police officers and several civilians, including an Orthodox priest, have been killed by armed militants in the southern Republic of Dagestan. They say the gunmen opened fire on two Orthodox churches, a synagogue, and a police post in two cities Sunday. Police say they have killed at least 6 of the attackers. Scotty Scheffler beat Tom Kim on the first playoff hole to win the PGA's Travelers Championship on Sunday, but he had to wait it out. A disruption by climate protesters sprayed powder on the 18th green. The protesters were tackled by police and taken away. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Michael Barr. Let's get this out of the way right now. There's a huge hockey game tonight.
There is.
We're still playing nuts. Hockey. It's 90 degrees.
It's June 24th. We're okay.
It's June 24th, and they have a Game 7 Stanley Cup. And I've had the honor, not a finals, but I've seen a few. That's like the second week of April.
Well, it's historic from the fact that Edmonton was down 3 games.
And they've won 3 in a row, right?
And they won 3 in a row. It's, this is exciting. I know people are going to be sleepy heading to work the next day because they're going to want to see this.
I'm fascinated to see what the ratings are. Lucas Shaw published a brilliant note. Excuse me. From Paris.
Of course.
What's that about?
No, he's a player.
He's like, I'm in Paris after Keene.
Yep.
Is that how you pronounce it, Lisa?
Keene.
Yes.
Keene. You put it in your nose. Keene.
Right.
Lucas publishes in Paris, and the NBA ratings were down.
I saw that. Yeah. And, but still.
87.
Sports kind of running the business
tonight. Who are we watching? McDavid is like he's got.
They put it on a Monday night too. It's like, come on.
We're doing hockey.
How about the weekend? We're doing hockey. Everybody loves hockey. Yeah, in Florida.
Well,
exactly.
Who do you think, Rich? I mean, come on. Can we get the surveillance control room camera on? Oh, we're not allowed to use that on Monday. That's it. Florida Panthers. That's the bet here.
There you go.
Informed crew, not like us. We're watching a number of things here. Over the weekend, huge New York Times article. Paul Sweeney. What an ugly... It can't be worse this week for Warner Brothers Discovery or Paramount. It just can't.
No, but we still don't have a sale of Paramount. I mean, again, this company's been for sale for a couple of months now. And again, just as recently as 5 years ago, you would have had a line out the door for strategic and financial people looking to buy this company. Now you can't give it away. It just shows you how things have changed in media with all this.
Well, we'll have more coverage on that. Moffett Nathanson out with an important note. We'll try to get Michael Nathanson on as well to give you an update on your streaming at home. The Mateo house, I mean, they stream everything. They're paying like $400 a month.
My computer just shut off.
Futures up 8. Yeah, we're having computer problems. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Right now, well, we've got a little mix of red and green on the screen. We have Dow futures up 0.2%, S&P futures up 0.1%, NASDAQ futures, they are little change, down about 2 points at 19,981. The 2-year yield at 4.74%, little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%, and that's up 1 basis point. Few companies topping the headlines. We'll start with Apple. They've been hit with a fresh EU warning. This is over allegedly illegal practices on the App Store that could lead to some more fines. Right now, Apple shares, they're up about 0.1%. Now, meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reporting Apple holding talks with Meta. They've held talks with Meta about integrating Meta's generative AI model into Apple Intelligence. We have Meta up about 0.5%. And sticking with tech, sources saying Broadcom in talks with ByteDance to develop an advanced AI processor. We have Broadcom up about 0.6%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Interactive Brokers, we thank them for their support in the Bloomberg Business Flash with El Mateo. Brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Discover the future of trading with our next generation trading platform, IBKR Desktop. Download IBKR Desktop at ibkr.com/desktop. Thank you to Interactive Brokers for foundational support of our conversation. And a good conversation, if you compare large cap to small cap, you can operatively use the word never. It's never been like this, which is a wonderful time to speak to David Sarby of Michigan, Managing Director, Portfolio Manager, and Cora really specializes in not owning NVIDIA, and he enjoys it. How's it feel, David, to be like in sectors or categories outside of these 7 stocks that move?
You feel like you're in middle school, Tom, and you're eating lunch by yourself at the lunch table because the cool kids don't want to have lunch with you because you don't own NVIDIA.
That's exactly right. I mean, and, in high school it gets worse when the cheerleaders are like, other side of the room with Apple and, NVIDIA and the rest of it. So then what do you do? How do you prosecute a mid-cap, small-cap strategy given what we have?
In balanced portfolios, pension funds, investment committees I sit on, you're still going to have a tilt to large cap stocks in your overall asset allocation. But I'm seeing more interest on the margin that people are looking to modestly increase their small mid-cap allocation simply because the stocks have lagged so much. Here we are. We're hitting a midpoint for 2024, and it's a do-over. The S&P 600 is negative. The Russell 2000 is up only about 2%. But for active managers, you can have returns between 5 and 6% because there's still, I think, a pretty good backdrop to finding profitable cash flow generating small cap companies.
So, David, how do you define small cap here, and how has that changed over the years?
Paul, I think it's anything, a company with a market capitalization, stock price times number of shares outstanding of less than $8 billion. Yep. And we know that when the market starts to move and move faster and potentially the Fed eventually cuts interest rates, that can be a good backdrop to being even down cap where you're buying the $1 and $2 and $3 billion market cap companies because they will move the fastest, even though it's been a bit of a laggard in the first half of this year.
One of the things about small cap investing, David, is there's less research coming off of Wall Street here. How do you find these names? I would guess it would be really kind of research. You guys have to do your work there.
That's precisely it. It's labor intensive. And I'll give you two very good formulas for finding good companies. You said it first. There aren't that many Wall Street analysts who follow the company. If you can find an underfollowed company that maybe only 2 or 3 analysts follow it, and you get it well before it gets rebalanced into the Russell 2000, that's a great formula. The other great formula is buy spinouts. You religiously monitor the Bloomberg spinout index. That's up over 20% this year. That I think is another good source to finding profitable, shareholder-driven small cap companies.
But David, what's so important here is the behavior of managements, and particularly I'm going to go to mid caps away from small caps. The usual idea, David, sort of just a generalization, is in any given broad category, 30% are in the game and 70% should be put out of their misery. How do you identify 30% of the broad mid-cap index where the managements have an attitude like Apple or an attitude like Lilly? How do you do that?
Tom, if I'm sitting across the table from a CEO or CFO and they start their discussion on cash flow from operations, move to free cash flow, then I want to keep listening. And that's where you're going to find companies that the number of companies that will double in a single year in the smaller mid-cap indexes are meaningfully higher than the S&P 500. Starts with cash flow.
So here's the money question. I know the answer. It's like a lawyer. You don't ask Sarby anything where you don't know the answer. He's so smart. David, the bottom line is, though, when you're in a meeting or our listeners and viewers are monitoring mid-caps, the answer is you have to talk to managements that are allocating capital, managements that are doing the habits of large cap companies. Are they easy to discover?
No. But given 30% of the Russell 2000 doesn't make money, you've already triaged out a number of companies that you don't want to pay attention to. But I think that's the key, is the ability to talk to and have a good dialogue with a small cap company, mid cap company where only a few analysts follow it, unlike Apple, I think is more meaningful. And you can have a more thorough discussion and a give and take about how you're going to create shareholder value.
This was, Paul, this was my meat and potatoes for years, and I totally agree with David. You line up, don't say 100 companies, who's got the time, but you're in a belief, like let's say years ago, specialty chemical, talk about bolt-ons, and you'd line up 20 companies and you'd only have 3 or 4 conversations. Paul, I'm doing the math quickly here on a Monday. Stay with me, Paul. I'm looking at 56 plus 4. There's only 60 buy, hold, sells on Apple.
I know. Exactly. A little bit overcooked. Hey, how about Barry Diller, David? You got IAC. That got my attention because Barry Diller always gets my attention here. What's the story on IAC right now?
They own a piece of Angie's List. They're increasing their ChatGPT business via their relationship with Meredith for digital and print publications. They own Ask Media. They own Care.com. Personally, when I need to get somebody to do the yard work that I don't do around my house, I go to Angie's List and I find them, and my mulch miraculously gets laid. And that's IAC because they own a piece of Angie's List.
David, we're from Manhattan. What's mulch?
Yeah. So that's good stuff, David. I mean, again, when you look at spin-outs, are companies still doing spin-outs?
Yeah, good question.
They are. They absolutely are. We saw Kellogg spin out their the cereal business from the snacks, the Cheez-Its and the Pringles. Both stocks are up quite well this year. Spin-outs there's usually about 15 to 20 a year. As I said, you watch it easiest in the Bloomberg Spin Index. It's up over 20%. And overall, if you think about the last 20 years, spin-offs, special situations has been the most important ingredient to providing excess return in that small mid-cap space.
David, love talking to you. Don't be a stranger when you're in New York. You are in New York. Stop by. Monday talking is hard to do.
I didn't know there was a Bloomberg U.S. spin-off index until David quotes it. It's up 30% year to date.
Yeah, Sarby's huge on this. David, thank you so much. He's with Ancora, Detroit. His next job is to solve the Tigers.
Yes.
It's like, see the Red Sox?
Yeah.
Are you kidding? Mike Barnacle's out this weekend. Out for Morning Joe. Red Sox destined. Oops, they've got the Orioles and the Yankees in front of them.
Yep, exactly. I think do we have a Subway Series starting, guys, coming up in the next couple of days here? I think.
What is it? We got a convention? Is this a tour in the control room? Can we get the surveillance control room camera on so we can see the interns coming through? Oh my God! From the University of Brockton, Bob is with us today. Great to have him in from Brockton, Massachusetts. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Right now, NASDAQ futures, well, little change. They're down about 17 points at 19,965. We have Dow futures up 0.2%, 97 points. S&P futures, little change, up about 4 points. We have the two-year yield at 4.74%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%, and that is little change. To commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,325 an ounce. Brent crude, $85 a barrel. WTI crude, $80 a barrel. What's moving the markets? RXO. There's news that it's going to buy UPS's Coyote Logistics for more than $1 billion. We have RXO up 12% right now. UPS, they're up about 0.2%. Prudential shares, they're higher after the UK insurer announced a $2 billion buyback. Shares in London up 6%. And NVIDIA shares, they're down more than 1.5%. The stock set to extend losses for a third consecutive session after already erasing over $220 billion in market cap. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. We'll get to Lisa's, eventful weekend. You had an eventful weekend.
Sure.
Held down the court at the On the Deck with Mr. Tucker.
Yeah, we took the ferry home. It worked out great.
Did you close the bar?
It was almost. We were there, had a cold beverage of our choice. But it's a great voyage to take that ferry.
We should. I would really, seriously, I'd like to do it.
Statue of Liberty, you go right by all of Brooklyn. And
Very
then
cool.
Yeah, going to the big harbor.
This is C Street.
Yes,
C
exactly.
Street.
They took care of us.
Good morning, C Street.
Yeah,
Thank you for taking care of Paul Sweeney, given the challenges of the train in New Jersey. We started strong. Michael Purvis with us with Tallback, and then we do even better now. We're Seema Shah, Principal Asset Management, and she's got a wonderful, wonderful global perspective tied into what do you do domestically as well. Is the rest of the world in love with U.S. big caps? Do they love, does the city love NVIDIA as much as we do?
Yes, I think they have to look at the numbers, and it's undeniable, the strength. And I think the thing that you continue to see is frustration, maybe, that people hadn't increased their exposure before. So
it's
the
on
same
their own.
as the US.
So this is important. You studied this, it's like third week or whatever, finance. Do you believe in window dressing? It's June whatever, 25. Paul, June 30th.
I know.
If I don't own enough Apple, I look like an idiot.
Exactly, right? So, you got NVIDIA bigger than Apple, bigger than some of these other names. It kind of came out of nowhere. But how do you think about those big tech names these days? Do we chase them, or do we try to find some other opportunities?
So look, we think that if you don't already have exposure, it's probably not the best time to be adding exposure, but you also don't want to be reducing your exposure at this point. We do think there's other opportunities in the market. We are expecting a broadening out in the rally, but again, this is not going to be anything which is like what you've seen for the big cap space. It's not going to be such a significant move in the broader market. But given the valuations where they are today, and given you've still got a fairly strong backdrop, the macro backdrop is slowing, but it's fairly strong. So you do want to have exposure to other parts of the market. And I think, if you look at financials, if you look at industrials, I think there are pockets which can do well, but not only just in the US. I think you can look outside the US. Latin America, parts of Asia, they also look pretty attractive.
How do we think about valuation here, just broadly defined? I would argue that it seems like the U.S. market would be fully valued, to be generous, and that I need to be looking at Europe or Asia. When you talk to your global clients, and is that what they're talking about?
Yeah, it's always been a situation that they look across the global map and they say, wow, the US is so expensive. Why is there nowhere else that you can increase exposure to? And I think certainly for this year, there has been opportunities. Europe, you mentioned, it is relatively cheap, but actually at this point in time, somewhat concerned about where that is going, and actually preference, as I said, Latin America, pockets of Asia, which has still got their exposure to the tech cycle, which we think can continue to do well.
One of the things I look at here is over the weekend, a lot of people, again, desperately wanting to trade or market time the big stocks. I saw a lot of research this weekend. Now's the time to get out. Now's the time to lighten up in that. What's your study at LSE of market timing? Not so much buy and hold, but just extending your belief. Somebody listening right now owns Microsoft. They got lucky. Somebody gave it to them, whatever. How do you extend your timeline and not market time?
Well, firstly, I think it's a fool's game almost to try and think that you're going to have perfect timing in this kind of market. And I think what's more difficult about the big tech is that I think that they're macro agnostic. So you almost have to look away from the macro cycle.
What do you mean by that? Macro agnostics?
Yeah,
I lost it in the accent. I wasn't sure. Macro
agnostic. It doesn't matter what the growth outlook is. It doesn't almost matter what the Fed outlook is. Those companies are almost creating their own demand now with the advent of AI. So actually what we're doing almost is becoming an individual stock picker and having to understand the dynamics of those specific companies. And to us, it's very difficult to call, but I think that party is going to keep going on for a bit
So this
longer.
goes to Michael Mauboussin and capital allocation. In the standard discounted cash flow analysis, Mauboussin would say, and I agree with him, that you have to put more weight on the individual quarter, the individual years, and less weight on fancy plug-and-chug math on the terminal value. I think there's too much analysis on what's Microsoft going to be doing 7 years and not enough weight on what are they going to be doing in the next 90 days.
And I think that's even more important for technology, because you're seeing that people are trying to understand on a month-by-month, quarter-by-quarter basis of where things are moving. And the thing is, with tech, it's moving so quickly, the progress that you've already seen is advancing really quickly, that actually, yes, that shorter time scale becomes more important.
All right, let's think about fixed income here, because a lot of folks are saying they can go to a U.S. Treasury, 2-year, get close to 5%. Is that enough, or do I try to take some credit risk here and get a little bit more creative?
So I think at this point with treasuries, firstly, duration is not particularly attractive at these levels. I think even though you're likely to see Fed cuts this year with a continuation, with a shallow cutting cycle most likely for 2025, plus concerns around term premium, the discussions around fiscal deficit, that actually yields are not going to come much lower from here. For credit, though, there is certainly interesting parts. IG is one area that we are certainly, we do have an overweight to, but we're looking certainly at the quality space.
You've lit up the live chat on YouTube worldwide. People are listening to you and they're saying, wait, Seema Shah is saying ignore macro. Let's be careful about this. Do you think this bull market of 12 stocks, 20 stocks, whatever, is removed from Fed analysis, where it's just about their individual stories?
I do. I don't think the Fed has an impact on these companies. I don't think if the Fed is going to cut in September versus December, that it actually has much of an impact.
This is a huge deal because I'm halfway there. I think it's way overrated. At least Bramo and I go on this all the time. She's like following the Fed thing up, down, side. I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. But you've gone full boat. You've just said you don't care what Chairman Powell says?
I think that it matters for the other 493 stocks. But I think for those 7 or however many we want to call it now, the magnificent ones, the Fed is not relevant into that analysis. But for that broadening in the rally, the Fed does matter.
Yep. Hey, Seema, how do you think about alternative investments, private equity, private credit, hedge funds, things like that? Where do you think that those belong in a portfolio today?
Oh, I mean, they absolutely need some kind of allocation.
Okay.
The returns are, to get the returns that people are looking for over the next 5-10 year period, if you don't have exposure to big tech and they're not going to keep delivering at the same pace that they've had, you need to look outside your traditional areas. So we are looking at the alternative space. I mean, even within the alternatives, a lot of focus on real assets because of inflation mitigation. But certainly on the private space, I think there has to be allocation to private credit.
In the time we've got left, you are of Aldrich and London School of Economics. How do you play the election in the United Kingdom? Is it a footsie opportunity? Is it a gilt opportunity? I get all the consensus in that. Forget about the gaming of the election. But is there an opportunity there for investors looking at 3 years?
So it depends what I'm assuming the Labour is going to win. If the Labour Party is really going to think about what is going to make the UK attractive to investors again, whether that's thinking about the EU trade relationship, whether it's thinking about capital gains tax, that has the potential to really improve the attractiveness of the UK. But we're still waiting to hear it because they haven't said much about it in their manifesto.
Have the pro-Brexit people, have they admitted that maybe that it hasn't worked, it's not the right decision, or is it still so partisan?
It is still quite partisan, but you are seeing more and more people becoming fairly quiet about the subject, which I think is an admission that it didn't work out so well.
And is that kind of what the data is showing you, that in fact it has not worked?
The data is showing that all the promises that were made in the event of Brexit have not come to fruition. And as a result, the economy has not benefited.
And you guys
from
can't
that
fix
crisis.
that overnight.
Can you see her? She could be on ITV or Sky.
I know.
I know. She worked at Treasury, so,
Oh, boy.
She could be a pundit,
I need to go to the London School of Economics. It looks
it's
like
great
a fun
school.
place to be.
Great school. Thank
Yep.
you, Mr. Robbins, and Derendorf, and the rest. Seema Shah of Principal Asset Management with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, Lisa. Today marks 2 years since the U.S. Supreme Court's Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade and sent the issue of abortion to the states for them to decide. Jen Klein, who heads the White House Gender Policy Council, says the decision has created a patchwork of state laws that has caused chaos and confusion and denied women life-saving health care.
Women like Amanda Zarowski, a mom in Texas who nearly died after she was repeatedly denied care while experiencing a miscarriage. Women like Caitlin Joshua, who was turned away from multiple emergency rooms in Louisiana, also while having a miscarriage.
Jen Klein with the White House Gender Policy Council. A U.S.-backed proposal to wind down the 8-month-long war in Gaza was cast into doubt after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he would only be willing to agree to a partial ceasefire deal that would not end the war. Russian authorities say more than 15 police officers and several civilians, including an Orthodox priest, have been killed by armed militants in the southern Republic of Dagestan. They say the gunmen opened fire on 2 Orthodox churches, a synagogue, and a police post in 2 cities Sunday. Car dealerships across the country are dealing with key outages as CDK Global, a major software company, falls victim to a cyber attack. The hackers are said to be demanding tens of millions of dollars to restore operation. Cybersecurity expert Scott Spiro says it is becoming more common when larger software companies like CDK fall victim.
These criminals know that if they're able to take down a software company like CDK, they take down the critical operations at these auto dealerships. And so by doing this, they figure the chances of getting paid are much larger.
Several major auto companies, including Ford, Stellantis, and GM, confirmed the hack is not just disrupting car maintenance and repairs. It's left thousands of dealers unable to process appointments or complete sales transactions. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And with Michael Barr, we go to surveillance gluten-free correspondent Lisa Mateo. Oh, Lisa, the Javits Center. There I was. This is something like 60 years old. The Summer Fancy Food Show.
Nice.
Thank you to Maria Loy Restaurant. I went all Greek last night.
What'd you have?
I had pita bread, and everything related to it included assorted baklava from Kantos Bakery, Patterson, New Jersey. I got a lecture from Steve on pita bread. The pita bread in the store is machine die cut, and they hand pull it and bless it or something. I'm not sure what, out of Kantos. Patterson, New Jersey, they're employing 350 people.
Sure.
And, when Michael Barr reaches for pita bread, that's what he reaches for.
Good. I didn't know that.
It's a huge deal. This is at the Javits Center.
Yeah.
I'm there with, I can't even pronounce it, Central Macedonia and Thessalonica.
Okay.
And all these hitters are there. Bonus round, the food was exquisite. It was just like,
Greece food is amazing.
They're like, the ugly American showed up.
But
there it was.
Brings his appetite. Very good.
And thank you to the Kantos Bakery of Patterson, New Jersey, and of course Maria Loy.
Very nice.
Everybody knows Maria. She's on, she's doing like olive oil on PBS or something. It's a huge deal. The Summer Fancy Food Show on now at the Javits Center in New York. Red and green on the screen, a little bit of red on the NASDAQ, all that with some difficulties with Apple. We'll have a lot more on that through the morning. The VIX from a 12-ish out to 13.75. Brent crude, can we round it up to $86 a
how
barrel?
about that?
I think so.
Yep.
And we're watching Japan intervention. It hasn't happened yet. From New York City. Stay with us, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have S&P futures up 0.1%, Dow futures up 0.2%, NASDAQ futures are a little change, down about 6 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.74%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%, and that is little change. To currencies, we have the yen 159.47 against the dollar. Even as a top currency official said, Japan ready to intervene at any given time. We have Bitcoin extending its drop. It was hit by a 6-day streak, outflows from U.S. ETFs for the token. Now, right now we have Bitcoin. It's at 61,000. Checking with other cryptocurrency linked companies, because we mentioned that, we have Coinbase Global down 3.5%, Marathon Digital Holdings down 4%. You have MicroStrategy down about 5%. And big food companies like Nestle, Danone, they are counting on GLP-1 users looking for healthier snacks. One product they say that it's flying off the shelves, yogurt. I agree. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
It's a Euro specialty show. I mean, Greek yogurt, like handmade or whatever they do with it.
No?
It's like I tried to put it out in my pocket. It didn't work.
Okay.
But desserts are just like scary.
Yeah.
Which yogurt do you like, Lisa?
The Greek yogurt, yes.
The Greek yogurt.
You have to do it. More protein. It's very good.
More
really?
protein. See, Tom? I mean,
it's good to know. You know.
Yeah, I don't ask her about food anymore.
How about
we're
that
just
Greek
not
yogurt?
on the same wavelength. I mean,
Not
I'm not
even
even going to go
close.
over there for like a barbecue.
Did you have a steak this weekend?
We did.
Did you?
Sure.
I did not.
Absolutely.
I tried to be healthy.
Yeah.
We had pork chops and all that. We say good morning to you. We're on Android Auto. I've been criticized by Android Auto people. Android Auto. Apple CarPlay as well. Learned at the Euro specialty food event.
Okay.
Everybody's on Apple CarPlay.
Yeah, of course they are.
I didn't have a bow tie on. I went cash. Like
Oh,
you.
really?
I went. Nobody knew who I was.
Never seen you cash. I've never
Wait,
seen you
one
cash.
guy-
Or
one guy-
an image of you
Yeah,
casual.
one guy goes, "Wait, are you the guy with the bow tie?" And they all listen on Apple CarPlay. Good morning on Apple CarPlay and YouTube as well. Search and subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, Building Every Day, out on YouTube.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
The Lisa Mateo Show, the front page is brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Interactive Brokers, they charge dollar margin loan rates from 5.83% to 6.83% rates. Subject to change. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare.
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
I'm looking for a man in finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes, sharpish, brain bud, sharper, jawline, bad boy.
Okay, that's enough of that tomfoolery. See, Sweeney's got the jawline. I don't have the jawline.
Tom's 6'5".
This thing won't go away.
He's
That's
in
Sad
finance.
Alex.
Yeah.
Sad Alex.
Okay, all right.
Oh, yeah, I'm getting it at home.
Yeah.
I come out of the pool with my floaties on, and the brat afterthought goes, "Yeah, you look like a man in finance." With the newspapers, because this won't go away this summer.
It will not.
The babe in finance, Lisa Mateo.
There are so many. Yeah, the girl on the couch did the song. She struck a deal with Universal Music Group. It's on Spotify. I mean, it's going crazy. But what it's also done, it sparked this trend because in the dating scene, finance bros are becoming the latest hot commodity, okay? Women want the finance bros. There was one woman, I remember on social media, she held up the cardboard sign and she said she was looking for the man in finance.
The article says it's like actually a national thing.
It is. Yeah. It's growing.
It was a thing back in the 80s. Let me just tell you that.
Okay.
So maybe it's coming around.
Deep in the song, when Sad Alex does this, deep in the song, there's a beautiful, I can't paraphrase it even, but she says, basically, you're working so many hours a week, just give me the keys to the place in the Hamptons.
Yep.
Does anybody understand these animals work 65 hours is a slow week?
Yep. That's what one woman who said, they actually interviewed, this is in the Wall Street Journal, she said she dated a man in finance. She's like, listen, you're never going to see him. Yeah. just put it straight out there, just letting you know.
The wonderful girl at Penn State nailed when she invented this madness. Maybe it'll go away by August. Next.
By the way, I put a little man in finance tribute out to you. Do it on Twitter, Tom, so you got to check that out.
Yeah, I saw that. PR people call it Bushi.
Bushi. Okay, here we go. This is going to spark something with you, Tom. The high-end pet care business. It's
there we go.
sparking this booming market. But here's the thing. It's forcing a lot of people into debt. There was one woman, she said she had this MRI scan for her dog, $2,000. Now she's paying 30% interest. The dog passed away, but she has no regrets. But a lot of people maxing out credit cards. They're tapping into retirement accounts, taking out loans for some of these expenses for their pets. I mean, they love them. People are more attached to them nowadays.
I would be careful here because, you know, I've been chastised at party. People really care about this.
Yes, yes.
I'm in the camp like the old days where a dog's a dog, move on, a cat, whatever. You know, we love them all and that. But you're right, people go mental. I mean, you know, Chris Whalen, you know, I go to the Horace Mann Veterinary Clinic.
Oh, okay.
I just write a tuition check out to Horace Mann for the doctor. Chris Whalen goes to the Preferred Dividend Veterinary Clinic. It's in Midtown somewhere, where the only way you pay is with JP Morgan Preferred Dividend shares. I mean, the bills get that high.
That's how they do it. But you guys are pet people? I'm not a pet person.
I'm not a pet person.
Okay.
I don't. I had one growing up, but
I just got Vet Bill's teeth done. Are you ready?
Wait, what?
The thing now is to avoid major issues when they're 8 or older.
Okay.
Is you get, like we get our teeth cleaned, except you get your teeth cleaned and it's like, you know, a rounding error. $1,300.
For one dog?
Yeah, and Kennel Fee, who's like got the IQ of a Kardashian, Kennel Fee wants whiting as well to make them brighter, and it's out of control.
It's out of control.
Next.
It's crazy. Okay, want to talk about Netflix. This was really good. You mentioned Lucas Shaw, writing from Paris for his latest newsletter, okay? He was talking about Netflix, one of the biggest players, but when it comes to advertising, he says, not so much. He says the setup for success was there. Netflix, they built this advertising business with the help from Microsoft. They added that advertising-supported tier for subscribers. But in the U.S., their advertising tier, it's just a fraction of the size of Peacock, Hulu, Disney, Amazon Prime. They didn't deliver as many impressions. The relationship with Microsoft is now strained, and it lets go of its head of advertising after a year.
They're not Amazon.
They're not.
They're not, and it's okay. They don't have to be, but they will get it because advertisers will come to them, even if they don't even ask. Advertisers will come to them because that's where the eyeballs are. So they'll get their act together. I'm not too worried. They will be a serious advertising player.
Lucas alluded to that.
Well,
I think my amateur take is Amazon's sort of on a roll right now.
Oh, Amazon's just awesome. I mean, you know, the big concern was there's only a duopoly here. You know, kind of Google and Facebook. Now you have a viable third digital advertising alternative, and that's Amazon.
There's a guy out on YouTube live chat. He sends his dog. It's one of those yap dogs, you know, weighs like 8 pounds, to the Marie Antoinette Veterinary Clinic.
There you go.
I mean, I can't imagine what the shampoo and the nail cut costs. Next.
And this last one is just a look, this from Fortune magazine, remember how Walmart came out with this new managerial pay boost? You know, they wanted to boost morale and help reduce turnover. So they raised their manager's salary. So there's one manager, he was straight out, and he talked about his salary. He's 45, his base salary of $168,000. He's a Walmart store manager after that increase. But he said with bonuses and stock grants, Walmart says he can make up to $524,000 a year as a store manager. This is a guy who's a Kurdish immigrant. He turned to the retailer in 1999, started as a part-time worker, making $8 an hour, and he just kept moving up the ranks. Nice. No college degree, just kept moving up.
I mean, some of these Walmart stores, they employ hundreds of people. Yeah. And I mean, it's a company in and of itself. These individual stores, it's a meaningful small business.
And like we look at UPS and 170,000 and this wonderful story. What enthuses me is in that store, there's probably 20 other people on the same track, and they're not getting the headline 500,000 income. But you got people starting, like you say, at $8 an hour, $12 an hour.
And they stick with it.
They're popping 150, 170, 200. That's really cool.
It is. They stick with
that was strong. Let's do Finance Bro every day this week.
Exactly.
The Beatles, classic. Good morning. Stay with us. Bloomberg Surveillance.
It's such a feeling that my love, I can hide, I can hide, I can hide. Yeah, you got that something. I think you'll
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Thrilled you're with us here. A really eventful week coming up. Let's get right to it. Thursday, Kaylee Lines leading our coverage. Joe Matthew. Okay. I guess they're in Washington and David Gura in Atlanta for this debate.
Okay.
And they're in...
Is it at 9 o'clock at night, though?
Yeah, it's late. Our coverage starts at 8 o'clock. Lots of simulcasts. Margaret Brennan simulcasting over at Face the Nation. And CBS as well. But it's a big debate. And I even saw this morning, they said President Biden's not returning to the White House before the debate. He's in rehearsal.
Oh, wow.
It's like when you're gone, Damian Sassower comes in. And, he has to go into rehearsal for a week just to survive.
He's got to go to makeup. He's got to go to hair. The whole thing.
My voice.
Yeah. And what I said, well, listen to my voice, and there's nowhere to go but up. Uphill. Good morning, everyone. Thrilled that you're with us. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. See how business strategies from the world of golf can help your company build competitive advantage. Watch the Business of Golf series at cohnresnick.com/golf. And last night, as I was a guest of the summer fancy food show, I met a former employee of Cohn Resnick.
Really?
Who raved about it.
Okay.
He went on to, food. He went on to fancy food.
All right.
But the gentleman, the young lad, raved about employment at Cohn Resnick to get the basics down of accounting. Lots going on here, of course, out on YouTube, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay as well. Our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning. Futures right now. Well, one mix. This is ahead of a week filled with politics, inflation data. Let's get to the data side first. We have the latest read on consumer confidence. That comes out tomorrow. New home sales Wednesday. Thursday, we'll get revised first quarter numbers on GDP, but all eyes will be on the PCE deflator. That's on Friday. On the political side, you talked about it. The focus will be on the U.S. presidential debate, the first one. As for futures, so we have NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, Dow futures up 0.2%, S&P futures are a little changed. The 2-year yield, 4.75%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.27%. That's up 1 basis point. Boeing taking another hit. Reuters reporting prosecutors recommending criminal charges against a plane maker violating a settlement over 2 deadly 737 MAX crashes. Boeing shares, they're little changed. Some good news for car dealerships who use CDK's global software. The company says it's begun work to restore the systems. That process will take several days and not several weeks. And finally, Target, we're just learning, partnering with e-commerce specialist Spotify to expand its marketplace for third-party merchants. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Joining us now, a member of the Bloomberg surveillance team, Damian Sassower, EM strategist, Bloomberg Intelligence. So I want to slip one question in here. Yeah. Paul's got a whole bunch of them. It's just simple. I'm seeing log convexity on EM currencies. Yep. They're slipping away. Discuss.
So I think if you talked to me 2 weeks ago, you did talk to me 2 weeks ago. I think the big theme there was U.S. exceptionalism, the fact that the rest of the world was catching up in terms of growth. Well, that narrative has been thrown and chucked out the door due to geopolitical risk. As Lisa rightly points out, it's not just France, it's not just Mexico. There's a lot going on there, and I think a lot to unpack. And so what we're seeing here at the end of it all, Tom, is central bank divergence. And by that I mean you've got the ECB, the Swiss National Bank, Sweden, Canada, they've all started cutting rates here. The U.S. is on hold, and I think some other central banks, specifically those in EM, are starting to find religion, and we're going to get some evidence of that on Thursday with the Philippines, Mexico, and Colombia, all of which are relatively high yielders. I mean, not really the Philippines, but the other two are. And we're going to see if the carry trade is still on. We saw a lot of that unwind as the result of the geopolitical risk over the last 2 weeks. And we're going to see if investors are putting more money to work here. I tend to think they are. If we look at Bundo AT spreads bouncing back, swap spreads widening here.
What's bouncing back?
I'm sorry, 10-year German Bund versus 10-year France, 10-year spreads. I mean, that margin widened pretty significantly.
Panic is coming back.
That's correct. So it's snapping back a little bit. I mean, look, it's all geopolitical risk, right? And I think, again, you got to look at the dollar smile, and to really get in the middle of that dollar smile, which is where you want to be for EM currencies to outperform,
He's killing
it's
me
not so
this
hard.
morning,
Not
Paul.
so easy.
Damien,
not so hard, not so easy.
explain to mere mortals in 12 seconds, what is a smile on the Bloomberg terminal?
Okay, so the dollar smile means that the U.S. dollar should perform well when you have very, very weak growth or very, very high flight to quality, high geopolitical risk. So those are the two ends of the dollar smile, right? That's when the dollar should perform well. Everything else, the dollar should perform poorly. So if U.S. growth is not growing as fast, but kind of moderating here, that's not really good for the dollar. It's good for other currencies. It's good for EM.
This is wearing.
It is.
Am I boring you to tears? You want to talk about Edmonton? Let's go. Let's talk
we
about
did that
Edmonton,
already.
Florida.
All right, INGO, the Bloomberg Index Browser, gives folks equities, fixed income, just total index returns across. You can see where various asset classes are doing. EM is pretty positive. I got some green on the screen there in emerging markets. Why is that? And do I still buy these things?
So EM dollar bonds are up 2.6% year to date. But EM local bonds, those denominated in local currencies, which have gotten torched specifically in the last few weeks, are down 4.5%, almost 5%, call it. So it's really become a currency story, and it goes back to what I was saying about the dollar. It's really, what do you think about the dollar, and how do you kind of position for that? And I think what you're going to find, and sorry, Tom cut me off a minute ago, it's not betting on currencies versus the dollar. It's looking for relative value within currencies outside of the dollar. So I mentioned the Australian dollar and the Norwegian krona as two central banks that are hawkish, that are hiking, which is good for rates, which is good for their currencies. And so maybe positioned by going long, Aussie Kiwi or long Noki Stoki, because, what's Stoki, Sweden, Kiwi is New Zealand. So, again, regional sort of divergence within each region. So I think that's what you see FX practitioners focusing most on here.
How about Mexico? I love Mexico. What's going on in Mexico?
They're gonna decide on Banxico's going to decide on rates on Thursday. I think they're going to keep it at 11%. That's what the market is pricing in. They're definitely going to.
Their discount rate is 11%.
11%. Their policy rate, yeah.
Where is that relative to the last 20 years?
I think it's pretty high.
Exactly.
No, I mean, it used to be in the 6s, 7s just a few years back. But Colombia's on Friday. They're going to cut rates from 11.75%, Paul, to 11.25%. So. Wow. These are high double-digit yielding economies.
Got to ask you about the EM nation, Japan here. just go. This is a 2-hour conversation.
Tokyo CPI on Friday.
Seriously, Damien Sassower, what is the efficacy of a third unilateral intervention? My reading is none.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think you have to look at the dollar and yen as two sides of the same coin. They are very, very tightly correlated, albeit, and so look, I think, Japan's going to do everything they can to kind of stop the bleeding, but, the market knows how to pull on that thread, and I think we're testing 160. We're going to try and test above that. The BOJ is going to have to intervene again. And when they intervene, Tom, you know what they do? They sell their U.S. treasuries. So really, at the end of the day, the linkages between exactly, they're selling treasuries to come up with cash, yen, so that they can go into the market and defend the yen, right? So, Paul, I mean, this is just all the same stuff. It's dollar, yen. It's part of that same currency block, and a lot of people don't realize that and respect it as much as we EM practitioners do.
Who are your clients that you talk to? Are they currency traders? Are they EM investors? Who would take your phone call?
A lot more people than you would think these days, Paul. No, I mean, look, I think, I talk to a lot of central bank officials and government types, because I think you try to pin strikes on some of these central banks and get a real feel for what they're thinking behind the scenes, and just how much are they impacted, Paul, by the dollar. I mean, is Colombia really going to cut 50 basis points if the Fed is on hold? I mean, the market thinks so. I'm not so sure. And so I think that's where you have this little divergence. Which central banks are more focused on their domestic economies as opposed to looking abroad at the dollar and what their funding costs externally are. And I think it's a catch-22.
Our theme today is the finance guy. This song has taken off as well. Is your son at that fancy school you're paying for down south? Are you making him into a finance guy? Is he going to be 6'5"?
He's doing it all by himself. He's probably listening right now. But I mean, he's really, we got to put him to work. Look, my wife is in real estate. She's a local real estate broker. She does very well. He's a real estate major at University of Miami. And right now, you know what he's doing? He's going to inspections. He's showing homes. He's basically, he's basically opening doors for, people to leave. That's what he's doing. He's got his real estate license, and, he's 19 years old, and we put him to work. get his knuckles bloody.
I mean, where you live, a house sells in 2 hours?
Yeah.
I mean, Westchester County is definitely a little bit of an abnormality relative to the rest of the country, but I mean, it's held up pretty well.
Well, you look tanned and rested. Stop by.
Yeah, don't work too hard.
I mean,
Lucas
Summer
Shaw
Fridays?
was in Keene, and then he's in Paris.
Fashion Week. I mean, the big Asics Kith collab. I mean, there's going to be new sneakers out there, Paul. I mean, I'm going to be wearing them into the studio here soon.
Very good.
Shortly.
Damien Cesar just look like the guy at Wedbush. Damien Cesar, thank you so much. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. At least 15 people, including several police officers, were killed in what appears to be a coordinated attack by gunmen in Russia targeting churches and synagogues in the southern Russian Republic of Dagestan. Authorities say an Orthodox priest also died. Another dozen police officers injured. Police say they have killed at least 6 attackers and that their main operation is now over. A completely random, senseless act. That's from the director of the Arkansas Department of Public Safety about the mass shooting at a grocery store in Fordyce. The alleged gunman will be in court later today. 4 people were killed, 9 others wounded, including 2 law enforcement officers. Colonel Mike Hager praising the 6 officers on the scene and condemning the alleged gunman.
The actions of the suspect were the most cowardly, pathetic actions imaginable, as he was literally preying on defenseless victims, the majority of which were female.
Hager says the suspect, 44-year-old Travis Eugene Posey, had a shotgun and a pistol. He was wounded. It is a hopeful sign, maybe, toward peace in Gaza. It comes after an interview with the Israeli Prime Minister. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
PM Benjamin Netanyahu is now saying that intense operations in Gaza will end very soon. He says the next step will be to get some troops into the north to counter Hezbollah aggressions and to bring some local residents back from where they were evacuated. He says he wants to do it by diplomatic means, but if not, he'll go another way. Meanwhile, he's sending Foreign Minister Yoav Gallant to the U.S. to talk about additional aid, which he says has been slowed down. The U.S. has consistently denied the allegation. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Today marks 2 years since the U.S. Supreme Court's Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade and sent the issue of abortion to the states for them to decide. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul, I thought MoffettNathanson did a great job on their mid-year thing. And to me, the absolute stunning item, which has been noted by all in the media, is this juggernaut YouTube TV actually declined in subscribers.
Yeah.
For the first time.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's become, I'm not going to say a mature business, but it's certainly gotten, in terms of number of subscribers, it's kind of reached some sort of critical mass here. Now the question is, how does Google continue to monetize it? It's been a phenomenal advertising vehicle for them, and I think it's going to continue to be. I think we see just these dollars coming out off of linear TV into digital.
This looks like Michael Barr. I mean, this weekend I had emotions of joy, sadness, fear, anger, and disgust over the Red Sox really doing better, and they're still 9 games back as well. Of course, I had to go and watch Inside Out 2 for the 4th time. I mean, Paul, it's like $700 million for a movie.
Exactly. And so,
Inside Out 2. The movies are dead.
Well, I don't know. It's tough out there, that's for sure.
Okay, stay with us for joy, disgust, and the rest. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen right now. Dow futures leading the gains, up about 0.2%, 85 points. We have NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 42 points. S&P futures, they are a little change, down about a point. 2-year yield, 4.75%. That's up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield, 4.27%. That's up 1 basis point. Few companies topping the headlines. We'll start with Apple. They've been hit with a fresh EU warning of allegedly illegal practices on the App Store that may lead to some more fines. Their shares are a little changed right now. Now, meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reporting Apple held talks with Meta about integrating Meta's generative AI model into Apple Intelligence. Meta is up about 0.5% right now. And we'll stick with tech. Sources saying Broadcom in talks with ByteDance to develop an advanced AI processor. Broadcom up about 0.1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it, Lisa. This is Joy. Just some inside baseball. I had a cruel and unusual childhood.
Yep.
In that I had a hand mower. My father was the last one east of the Mississippi to get a power lawnmower. So I'd go mow lawns at fancy people's houses, and they'd have a power mower. That was like Nirvana.
With the little blades that turn around?
I had the one with the little blades turn around on the acreage.
That you have to push?
Not only push, it didn't have a motor.
It was a cruel childhood in Rochester, New York. And one of the lawns I mowed was a giant of economics, Carl Brunner. And at the University of Rochester, along with Carnegie Mellon, he and Alan Meltzer invented the modern economics symposium out of thin air. And that great link from Tepper and Carnegie Mellon to Simon at Rochester can only be Seven Yeltigan, who joins us right now, the dean at Simon School. Let me get people's attention. There's a million blah, 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 blah MBAs. The Economist ranks your school #1 for return on investment. What's the pixie dust on the Genesee River in Rochester?
Yeah, we seem to have some pixie dust. That's certainly true. Well, I think we do bring a lot of students, and a return on investment is measured in different ways, but what we bring in students that have enormous talent, give them some really good rigorous education, and help them launch their careers. And right. The difference between what they were able to achieve before coming to business school and after what they are able to achieve is a big delta, and that's what lands us there. I think it's the power of that education and power of that experience.
Shevin, talk to us about this U.S. economy here. I mean, it's an election year. We're going to hear a lot about deficits, the national debt, all those types of things. I've been hearing about that my entire life. We actually have a little calculator down there in Lower Manhattan that calculates the national debt every day. That's been there since I was a kid. Do we have to worry about that kind of stuff? When do we have to worry about it?
I think we certainly do want to worry about it when we're running very, very large deficits, beyond sort of 10% of GDP and on a sustained basis. Right now, though, even though debt to GDP ratio is higher than it's been in 80, 90 years, it's not something that keeps me up at night. I think a lot of those counters are a little bit misleading because it's sort of like your own mortgage or your own, firm debt. It's what takes to really finance and service that debt that matters. And by and large, it's not costing the U.S. government that much.
What is the biggest economic challenge, do you think, or the biggest business challenge out there right now?
I think there are some short-term things like the election. Election years are always extremely, there's a lot of uncertainty. They tend to lead to a lot of fluctuations. I think being able to lend this inflation towards 2% is one of the challenges that we've been watching very, very closely. The latest news are good, but we still have to get to that, head towards that 2%. In general, though, I think some of the trade policies that might change, with the upcoming elections, the isolationism, and of course the global, landscape right now with the geopolitics.
Do you still teach globalism in the business school? That's what I grew up with on Wall Street for the last 30 years, globalism. I mean, you had to go to Japan, you had to go to the UK, you had to, is that out of favor these days?
I don't think it's out of favor. I think we always want to reduce barriers to trade. We understand that there's huge kind of gains to trade, whether you do that locally, you do that across state lines, or you do that across national lines. And that is still, of course, there are some caveats attached to that, with information technology being one of them, and you know, privacy laws and so on. But no, we still teach sort of reducing barriers to trade.
You, more than anyone I know, personifies not the Rust Belt, but all the articles that say the affordability in Pittsburgh and Rochester and 15 other towns is to die for. Can you have an optimism like Steve Case does, the AOL founder, where he said, look, we can build technology, we can build elite manufacturing processes in these affordable areas away from Silicon Valley, away from Michael Dell's Austin? Do you believe Pittsburgh and Rochester and the others can do it?
Absolutely, and I think it's a different kind of manufacturing. It's a, you know, we're not talking about the kind of the Rust Belt manufacturing. I think we're talking about a lot about additive manufacturing, a lot more technology enhanced manufacturing, and we can certainly see a lot of mid-sized businesses thriving in these areas. And with the enhancement of technology, I think we can certainly provide a different kind of economic boom.
What do you think the role today is of business schools, MBA programs in today's business here? What do you think the role is right now?
I think we're always going to need people who are going to be able to understand different components of business and be able to synergize them into strategic decision making. So what an MBA does is really give you an overall very good education about different aspects of business. What is really paramount now is marrying that with all of the new technologies. Generative AI, how is AI going to change not just what you do on a daily basis as your productivity changes, but also what that means for the workforce. What kind of talent management is really facing us in the near and medium future?
How about entrepreneurship? I mean, I think when I went to business school 100 years ago, it was investment banking, consulting, you know, but now a lot of kids are coming into business school and they want to be entrepreneurs. I mean, how do the business schools address those types of kids?
Some business schools, if you look at sort of, you know, business schools in Silicon Valley and in you know, Boston, certainly concentrate on entrepreneurship as in sort of, we want to launch businesses with students at the helm. We want to, you know, launch some startups. But the view that we have is that innovation is key. It doesn't matter where you go, whether you go to an established company, you go to a public company, you go to a nonprofit, or even an education industry like we are in. And if you don't have that innovation mindset, you're not going to really survive. So innovation is key.
We got to wrap it up. I gave a lecture once at Simon years ago, and I was thunderstruck, first of all, by the absolute silence. It was like working, you know, like lecturing at a military academy, you know, where there's like total focus. Yep. And what it has to do, and I'm going to give a major shout out to Rutgers as well, which I think is the same energy. The diversity of your program. A lot of people talk diversity. You people have done diversity. What's everybody getting wrong now on diversity, where you're ranked #1 by U.S. News?
I think what is really hard is not just bringing people in, but actually ensuring that they have a really good experience while they're there. And whether that's sort of diversity with respect to backgrounds, whether that's diversity versus, you know, in the demographics, I think we form a community that's really close-knit and very, very supportive. Right. And that's not easy to do. A lot of people talk about it, but when you actually have that lived experience, and that really is what fuels the next generation, next cohorts of students wanting to come and experience Simon, because they hear from the alumni.
Right. Selvin Yeltikin, thank you so much. Have you survived the winters?
They haven't been that bad. They haven't been that bad since I've been there, I've been told.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm getting, you know,
When I grew up there was winter and the 4th of July, and it's about where it ended. Selvin Yeltikin, thank you so much. In Western New York at Simon School, University of Rochester, the ratings are jaw-dropping across what you see at the FT and Bloomberg Business Week and U.S. News and World Report. Right now, futures up 6, Dow futures up 108, the VIX 13.75. What am I watching? 10-year real yield 2.03%. Thursday, the debate from New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Coming up, interest rates are higher. What does that mean for credit investors? Amanda Lynham, she's head of macro credit research at BlackRock. I think that's an asset manager. I don't know. I think I've heard of it. That's coming up.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got a mix of red and green on the screen. S&P futures, well, little change, up 4 points. We have Dow futures up 0.2%, up 103 points. NASDAQ futures, that little change, down about 16 points. We go to the 2-year yield, 4.74%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.27%, and that's up 1 basis points. To moving the markets, we have RXO. They're going to buy UPS's Coyote Logistics for more than $1 billion. So RXO right now up 12%. UPS down about 0.2%. Prudential shares, they're soaring after the UK insurer announced a $2 billion buyback. Shares up 6% in London. And NVIDIA shares, well, they're down more than 1.5%. The stock set to extend losses for a third consecutive session after already erasing over $220 billion in market cap. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. One of the great bias I have, folks, is there's really no substitute for doing what's called sell-side individual sector research, like we've got from our next guest. But first, before that, it's on a Monday. You know, economic indicators. Paul, why don't they do economic indicators on a Monday?
I don't know. Why
it's
not?
like people are, where they work from home?
I guess. I don't know.
They just slide in.
We're here.
We're here, so is Commonwealth. And we thank Commonwealth for their support of our economic indicators. A huge week ahead for Commonwealth. Commonwealth supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology. And technology is what you need right now because that's the only thing going up. Joining Amanda Lynham with BlackRock here. You covered healthcare and insurance, like the nitty gritty, right?
I did. Yes.
How does that affect your broader view? Are you bottom up essentially?
Sure. And good morning. Thank you for having me. Yeah. So I covered insurance and healthcare from 2005 to 2014. I think what it's done is it's given me a healthy skepticism for how things can turn quickly. Covering insurance during the financial crisis was a humbling lesson in is risk management as tight as management teams think it is, and how quickly things can unravel and how closely things can be correlated. And my bottoms up, I think we try to do is marry the micro with the macro. I think one of the lessons since the financial crisis is that some of the large capital structures, at least in the corporate credit market, can really influence sentiment materially. We've seen that in various times, certainly during the pandemic, but even in more benign sell-offs like late 2018, when there was kind of concern over a couple BBB capital structures falling to high yield, the market really sold off on that. And so I think being attuned to those risks is really important for risk management.
Talk to us about credit risk in this market today. We've got higher interest rates stressing some borrowers here. How do you think about credit quality out there these days?
So I think just to level set, we're expecting a shallow rate cutting cycle. So for corporate credit, that means we should not be expecting material, significant near-term interest rate relief.
Okay.
That has an implication for credit fundamentals, obviously, because corporates will continue to need to navigate this higher cost of capital environment. Right now, growth has been kind of the saving grace for credit. Resilient growth, especially in the U.S., which was notably above trend until, I would say, until it's trending recently, maybe a little bit softer, has allowed corporates to absorb those higher debt costs.
Okay.
Going forward, that will remain critical, although I would say the encouraging data point is that we're actually seeing early signs of plateauing in corporate default rates and improving recoveries.
Okay.
So that suggests that corporates are entering this period from a position of strength.
Interesting. So, when I think of how much credit risk do I want to take here, I noticed that when I look at my I&Go function for the the total returns here, high yield has actually been the better performing asset class within fixed income, and that surprises me because there's been so much talk about a recession and
yes.
so on.
Yeah, and it really points to that growth backdrop. So
Okay.
growth has been supportive, a super supportive tailwind for a growth-sensitive asset class like high yield and even for leveraged loans. In terms of taking credit risk, we like moving down in quality within IG, so favoring triple Bs over, say, higher-rated single As, because I think even when you're moving down in quality in IG, that's still a pretty solid place to be. Okay. And then I would say in high yield, a decent part of the high yield index actually trades well inside of the index spread, which is already quite snug. So that single B area is the sweet spot. I would not be, importantly, chasing triple C credit risk in high yield.
And I downplay the Fed parlor game. I just don't buy it, but it's a nice crutch. Neil Dutta with a blistering note this morning. He's optimistic. He's a glass half full guy at Renaissance Macro. And it's just 3 bullet points. I won't bother you with the details, folks. The third bullet point is out of touch Fed speak. How out of touch is this Fed on the need to cut rates and get it started?
Well, I think probably the most notable piece of Fed speak for me was from the June press conference where Chair Powell said getting to 2.6 or 2.7% inflation was a good place to be. And then he also mentioned that their current forecasts are assuming good but not great inflation data. So I think what they're telling you is that they actually could cut well before they reach 2%, which they've been guiding to, in fairness, for the better part of a year and a half. But I think actually they're saying that they're just waiting on the inflation data to confirm, and I think the groundwork is being laid for at least the start of a rate cutting cycle in September or the fourth quarter, because we've had an inline April, a much better than expected May. To the extent that we get a few more prints of that, I think they could certainly start a rate cutting cycle, but importantly, it's going to be shallow as long as we don't have a significant downturn in growth, and I think that interaction between growth and higher rates will be incredibly important for credit.
What are some of the sectors that are attractive to you guys that screen well for your team these days?
Yep.
I come from the TMT background and the media and telecom companies. They love to issue debt.
Yes.
What are some of the sectors you guys like?
Sure, and that space has been under a significant amount of pressure for a host of reasons, especially in high yield. I would say right now we prefer financials and certain parts of the cyclical backdrop, maybe even commodities related, energy. I think it's really tricky though heading into the second half of the year because we need to balance some of the potential policy shifts that may be on the horizon. So for example, if we have tariffs, are you a commodity producer or are you a commodity purchaser? Are you reliant upon goods to transverse across international waters to get to their end destination? So I think it's really placing a lot of emphasis on granular credit selection, but at a high level, financials still haven't closed their underperformance gap.
So when every quarter we get obviously the financials, they report their earnings, and the next day they come into the market selling debt. Are they calling you guys to buy this debt?
Well, I think in general, the IG market has been very receptive to issuance from financials, but even from industrials, and we've seen modest new issue concessions. We're off to a really strong start. Actually, if this pace continues, IG issuance will be at a well above the 2023 pace. I think from the financial perspective, really what matters is the growth backdrop and these tail risks on CRE. I think for choice, we like moving down in quality when some of the larger banks, so down in subordination, so subordinated debt of a larger bank as opposed to kind of a smaller, very regional bank that might have outsized exposure to CRE versus tangible account.
Where are the shadows right now?
I think CRE is probably one of the tail risks that we're watching. If you think about amend and extend activity, you've seen a lot of extensions of CRE loans.
What about private credit?
Private credit is for sure. I think there's a focus on our new entrants kind of throwing underwriting discipline to the side in order to capture share. But actually, if you look at data from Preqin, new entrants in private credit have raised 2.5% of total capital since 2022, and actually that's a much lower percentage than what it was even in 2019 and 2021. So I think what that's telling you is the rate environment is moving higher and becoming more challenging. Investors are being more disciplined in terms of discerning where they're allocating capital. By contrast, private credit lenders with 4 or more funds have raised 85% of capital.
In your world, I don't think it's any different than equities. In that, Paul, what was it, 3 phone calls to do the Home Depot deal?
Right.
And the 40-year piece came in 100x basis points better. And the bottom line is some of these companies, these institutions, can make huge transactions with 5 phone calls, including you.
Yes.
You get the phone
Sure,
call, don't you?
sure. So now the investment grade market, I think, is in a league of its own in terms of the ability to do jumbo-sized deals. In the private credit market, there's a lot of diversification in terms of strategy, vintage, portfolio, company size. Are you targeting the upper middle market that could issue in the syndicated high yield or loan market, for example? Or are you targeting core middle market? There's a lot of dispersion there. But in general, I think as a broad takeaway, the capital markets are open for lower rated issuers, and that will be critical heading into, if we do have a growth hiccup, their ability to refinance the upcoming maturities.
Amanda, thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda Lynham with us, with BlackRock.
Always good.
Always get a huge response when she's in about the nuances of fixed income, and we'll ask her, on the break, we'll ask her about NVIDIA, see what she thinks about that. Red and green on the screen here this morning on the yield. We got a quote yield for Amanda, 4.26% for the 10-year. Yield. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. We're just 3 days away from the first debate in the 2024 rematch between President Biden and former President Trump. Bloomberg's Laura Davison reports a lot is riding on the CNN presidential debate for both candidates.
This will be the first time that these two men are appearing, in the same room since the 2020 election. And the things that people are looking for from Biden are, what does his stamina look like? Is he able to come on and appear presidential and like he has 4 more years in him? And with Trump, they're basically looking to see if he will be boring and act presidential.
Bloomberg's Laura Davison. Our coverage of the CNN presidential debate begins this Thursday night at 8 p.m. Wall Street time with a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and television. Russia's southern region of Dagestan is holding the first of 3 days of mourning following a rampage by Islamic militants that killed 19 people, most of them police, and attacked houses of worship in apparently coordinated assaults in 2 cities. The lone suspect in a mass shooting at a grocery store in south central Arkansas is due in court today to face charges in the deaths of 4 people and the wounding of 9 others. 44-year-old Travis Posey was taken into custody after exchanging gunfire with police. Yesterday, hundreds gathered in the parking lot of the grocery store to remember those who died. Arkansas State Police Chief Mike Hager says the youngest to die was 23-year-old nurse Callie Weems.
She was shot while rendering aid to another gunshot victim. Instead of fleeing the store, she stopped to render aid.
Chief Hager says Weems leaves behind a 10-month-old daughter. Buckingham Palace discloses Princess Anne has sustained minor injuries and a concussion. The injuries were sustained in an undisclosed incident on the estate where she lives, and it happened last evening. The 73-year-old sister of the king remains hospitalized as a, quote, precautionary measure for observation and is expected to make a full and swift recovery. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney, the future streaming, according to the moguls, figuring it out. James B. Stewart, Benjamin Mullen over the weekend in the New York Times. A great job. And you mentioned him earlier. At the end of the day, with Sarandis, Roberts, all the rest of them, you just lean forward when Barry Diller opens his mouth. Who is Barry Diller?
Barry Diller is one of the original media moguls, broadcast television, cable television, home shopping. He ran Paramount Studios. I mean, there's nothing in the media space where Barry Diller hasn't, been a major influencer over the last 50 years. And so when you think about the business model for Barry Diller, John Malone, those types of folks, they are now in a completely new world where programmers now have a direct connection to consumers through these streaming services.
Yeah.
If I'm creating a program, I throw it on YouTube, it goes right to consumers.
What I love about Diller, he grew up really advantaged in Beverly Hills. And, at 82 years old, you say, well, how do you do it? It's textbook. It's classic. He started out in the mailroom of the William Morris Agency.
Exactly.
Hey, kids, shut up. And that was back when there was no internet.
Right.
That was like an important,
Yeah, right out of
job.
Central Casting, and he's done it all. And he's now with his latest, his most recent company that he still has a major influence on and control and ownership is IAC, which is focusing on some of these
Lisa
internet
mentioned
brands.
that today.
And so, but again, it's great to get a point of view from again, the Barry Dillers or the John Malones on where the future of entertainment is going to be. And it's Netflix.
Yeah, but what would he do with Paramount? Because he's associated with Paramount.
Sure, yeah.
And he must just be going mental over it.
No, exactly right. And, you know, the once beloved and hugely valuable Paramount film and television studio just can't find a buyer right here. It's just amazing for a lot of us that have, you know, kind of grown up with some of the values associated with these studios.
Yeah.
They just can't find it.
Great article. I'll get it out on Twitter and all. It's like it dovetails beautifully with Lucas Shaw of Bloomberg. From New York City, Bloomberg's surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Right now, we've got a mixed picture. We've got NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, Dow futures up 0.2%, S&P futures are little changed. We have the 2-year yield at 4.74%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.26%, and that is little changed. To currencies, we have the Japanese yen 159.48 against the dollar. Over to Bitcoin. Bitcoin actually extended its drop, hit by that 6-day streak of outflow from U.S. ETFs of the token. Let's get to the price, down nearly 4% right now at 61,160. Now, because of that, I want to look at a few cryptocurrency linked companies like Coinbase Global down 3.5%, Marathon Digital Holdings down more than 4%. And some news around online fashion retailer Shein. Reuters reporting it's confidentially filed papers to list shares in London. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. We haven't talked about the Apple thing. I skimmed it. I didn't read it. I'm not like an expert on it. But when does Apple just say to the EU, "Oh, okay"?
It's on. You're right,
enough.
Tom. It is. It's ongoing. And this has been, Tom, 25 years starting with Microsoft. The EU just takes a heavier hand to a lot of technology and how it impacts people's lives.
Okay, so I got an app. I mean, Lisa's got her, her workout app on Apple. You should see it, folks. It's 5-star.
Yeah.
Editor's choice. And so Lisa's got her app, and the EU wants Lisa to be able to tell you where to buy it cheaper than at Apple, on Apple?
I don't know. I mean, that's basic. I mean, it's basically they're just saying, hey, we want more customer privacy, more, we don't want the app kind of, supporting themselves at the expense of others and so on and so forth. So it's just, it's kind of what the EU has historically done with U.S., or just technology in general.
With Fordham Global Insight, a 3-hour conversation is in order. Tina Fordham joins us this morning. Tina, it's a quiet summer in Europe. My word. Tina, let me get to the July 30 French election, I guess its impact on all of us. There are 2 votes. Does a pro like you just ignore it and move right on to July 7?
Oh, I wish we could ignore it, but no. In fact, the first round is this coming Sunday, and the second round is July 7th. So we've got the 2 rounds. The first one in just a few days. Macron gave himself the least time possible, really, to call these snap elections, and it's thrown the whole French political spectrum into disarray and woken up those of us who haven't spent a lot of time focusing on French politics. I mean, really, since Macron took office in 2007 with his centrist party.
My basic take, looking at all of this sum, including the U.S. debate and that, is that if Macron is defeated, it's some form of conservative right-wing coalition. Is that feasible, or are the polarities so fractious? Even that's not going to happen.
Well, first of all, the French political landscape is highly charged and highly fractious. And lots of the political parties' names start with R, so they sound the same for outside observers. It's going to be confusing. Renaissance, Rassemblement, Reconquête, this sort of thing. Macron's party is center-right, so, you know, that's worth restating. It's the populist right under Marine Le Pen that has been working hard over the years to normalize and kind of mainstream itself, that looks like it stands to benefit. But the mathematics on this 2-round race and the 500 and something mini elections that take place make the calculations really difficult. And so first of all, just coming up with scenarios, which is what you would normally do in this situation, is difficult.
Yeah, Paul's looking for dressage tickets down the Seine River at the Olympics. Paul, what do you got?
Let's go to the UK here. Tell us what we should be thinking about here, Tina, with the UK elections.
Well, the UK elections are on the 4th of July, so in between 2 rounds. I have been saying for some time, I mean, first of all, the UK elections were due this year. They had to be called, they could have been called by January at the latest. Still, the timing is, you know, a bit of a head scratcher. It's not usual to try to make people come to the polls in the height of summer and mess up everyone's summer vacations. Sunak, you know, is widely rumored here in the UK to be, you know, be looking to get back to California and join Nick Clegg somewhere like Meta in the Silicon Valley. But he insists he wants to remain in his Yorkshire constituency as an MP. That's something that's unusual about the British system, that politicians stick around. Theresa May has stayed on as an MP. But in this case, the UK is bucking the trend for the rest of Europe, which is moving far right, in fact, and looks likely to vote in a Labour government by a landslide.
And that's kind of where I wanted to get to. How do we, you know, for our audience here in the United States, how do we think about, you know, some of these European countries really moving to the right? And you mentioned, we were talking about France earlier, and the UK going more to the left. What does that tell us? How do we think about that?
Well, so the UK is an outlier in the wider European trend with that in mind, but we've had 14 years of a Conservative Party government, 14 years. That is a very long stretch. So first of all, it's an anti-incumbent move. Secondly, 8 years ago yesterday, and I can't believe it was this long ago, we had the Brexit result. Brexit has been the elephant in the room during this campaign because nobody wants to tell voters they voted for something that, you know, went the wrong direction and that they possibly misjudged the outcome. But it has undoubtedly made people in Britain poorer. And they do understand that Brexit is the main cause of what ails them. It just hasn't featured in the campaign, which is odd.
Tina, one final question. Let's drag you back to the United States of America. What will you look for in the Thursday debate?
Well, signs of life. I think we'll all be looking for sentience and signs of life. One of my clients in private equity in the US described the race as between demented and dementia. I don't know if you use these kinds of technical terms on Bloomberg Radio, but I think a lot of Americans see it that way, and you're going to have the two of them side by side. People like me will be getting the popcorn out as well as covering it. Arguably, the bar is higher for Joe Biden because there has been this relentless kind of narrative about him being a doddering, old fool. And Trump comes out guns blazing with, what is really also a meandering way of expressing himself. But the other side of it will be, how does this work without a studio audience? Someone like Donald Trump really, I think, needs the energy of the crowd. But this was a condition that reportedly President Biden required. So the debates rarely move the needle on polls, but it will generate headlines, and perhaps it will mean a bit more in a race like this, where so many Americans really don't like either candidate.
Tina, thank you so much. Tina Fordham with us, Fordham Global Insight, I should say, Fordham Global Insight in London. Just hugely, hugely valuable. Our debate, Joe Matthew, Kaylee Lines, everyone's simulcasting. I don't think I've ever seen this. It's going to be there. David Gurrow will be in Atlanta.
Yep.
And it will be, it's original. I mean, this to me is original, is going back to my youth and, Nixon, Kennedy, and all that from my darkest,
But I think Tina's actually spot on here. People just want to see how these two can perform I guess, cognitively.
We're only playing music today from when the debates were a debate. Stones.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Lisa Mateo, and Michael Barr. A Monday of a very, very eventfully quiet economic day today. Thank you, Commonwealth, for your support of our economic indicators. But, Paul, it's a quiet week, but there's a ton of economic data coming out this week off the debate.
Yeah, people tell me, the smart people, Tom, PCE deflator at the end of the week is going to be really big, because that's what the Fed looks at in terms of gauging inflation. So we'll build up to that towards the end of the week.
It's a summer in New York City. I guess it's we haven't even talked about the heat. I guess tomorrow and the next day is our last bout of it.
Yep.
But we're a little bit better. How's the beach?
Cold. Literally.
Like the air temperature?
Sweatshirt weather,
really?
Cold. The ocean is 58 degrees. Don't ask me why. And the breeze has been coming off the ocean for the last 2 weeks. Literally sweatshirt weather.
I was, I had a wonderful weekend, and I learned all about Central Macedonia, which is like Eastern Greece.
Okay.
Over to Turkey, Thessalonica. I knew nothing about it.
Ooh, you never been?
Never been.
Are we doing a cruise there or something?
No. We were talking to some people wrapped around Maria Loy, who's a great restaurateur and on PBS, and she, you go to her place, and there's nothing that's not incredible.
Fabulous.
And I can't even pronounce the stuff. There's Koulouria, which is a braided butter cookie, and Mellow Macarona, Phonikia, which is like little rum balls or something.
That sounds good.
Good Morning Kanto's Bakery.
I like baklava. Baklava is good.
I couldn't work there. I just eat it all.
It's delicious.
I'd be a securities risk. Good Morning Kantos. They were great people last night. So I was good. You went to On the Deck with John Tucker.
Fabulous Friday.
What did you like? Did you try the lobster avocado?
They have the nice little lobster roll there. Was pretty good. Right. And then the cold beverage of your choice. It was right out on overlooking the water.
What'd you do, Lisa? Go to Costco?
Yeah, I wish I was stuck on a softball field in the heat.
Oh, you were.
I was sweating bullets.
They won big. But
They did.
They won the whole thing.
They won their championship.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
It was really, really good. Okay. Yeah. After 2 days, these poor girls, they stuck it out.
Do you let your daughter see you sipping the gin and tonics from the flask?
It's in my nicely disguised.
Oh, there it is.
There
your
you go.
triple leveraged all
my
cast
triple
thermos.
leveraged all cast thermos. That's where the little secret sips come from.
What is it, Yeti? And the limes don't tarnish the
and it stays
perfect
cold.
stainless steel. It stays cold. That's good to know. Bloomberg surveillance this morning in this hour. Lori Calvasina waiting. Brought to you by Build America Mutual. They insure U.S. municipal bonds that finance essential American infrastructure and provide guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Be part of Building America. Invest in BAM, B-A-M, invest in BAM insured bonds. Our Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mateo.
And NASDAQ futures under pressure this morning, down about 0.2% with NVIDIA set for third day of losses. NVIDIA shares, they're lower as well, down more than 1%. That's taking its market value further below Apple and Microsoft. We'll get to S&P futures now. Little change, down about 2 points. Dow futures up 0.2% or 80 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.74%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.26%, and that is little change. This week, you were talking about it, that focus shifts to the Fed's preferred gauge of consumer costs. We're talking about Friday's core PCE reading. It's expected to confirm easing price pressures, could pave the way for an interest rate cut in September. Currently, markets see a 65% chance of that happening. Now, shares of Boeing down 1%. Prosecutors recommending criminal charges against the company for violating that settlement over 2 737 MAX crashes. That's according to Reuters. And then we'll take it to retail. Target partnering with e-commerce specialist Shopify. They're going to expand its marketplace for third-party merchants. Shopify up about 1.5%. Target down 0.3%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Joining us now, Lori Calvasina, RBC Capital Markets. Lori, there's a brutal drawdown in the Standard & Poor's 500, 0.5%. Over the weekend, lots of gloom. OMG, big tech is done. Is big tech done?
Well, I think that's the big question that everyone's been trying to figure it out. And we keep having these head fakes where we think this big, massive rotation in leadership is finally getting started. It lasts a little while. And then we go right back to the old stuff. And I think I do think ultimately this market will rotate, but I also understand why it's having trouble doing so. And I think part of the reason why it's having trouble doing so is all the economic excitement that we were seeing. I think we saw a lot of it in February, where we saw GDP forecasts for 2024 just ratcheted up really, really fast in a hurry, in a big way. We're just not getting that. If I look at the 2025 GDP forecast on the ECF, I think it's ECFC on Bloomberg is the function. You can track what the sell side economists are saying every week. And that's inched up from 1.7 to 1.8%. And that's still a below trend level. If you look at some of the quarterly numbers, we're headed into kind of a softer patch of below trend type GDP. That is just not the kind of macro backdrop that typically sees cyclical small caps and value beat large caps and growth. So I think there's this itch that this growth trade is overvalued. It's crowded. It's sort of the earnings expectations are decelerating on the one hand. That all suggests you should be moving out. But on the other hand, you really need these economic tailwinds, and they're just not there. So you've just got these cross currents that are fighting with each other right now.
Lori, are you surprised that in a world where we came into this 2024 and the market was discounting 6 Fed rate cuts, and now we're down to something like 1 or 2, despite that trend in Fed outlook, the S&P 500 is up 15%. Does that surprise you?
So I think that it makes sense to me, again, in the context of that ratcheting up of economic expectations that we saw for 2024 earlier. If you go back and look at the GDP forecast for 24, last summer it was tracking at 0.6%. 0 to 2% is a lousy environment for the equity market. You typically see stocks go down when you're in economic purgatory like that. But 2 to 4%, and now 2024 is tracking around 2.4. That's typically a very solid environment for the stock market. The average gains, I think, are like 12, 13%, somewhere in there. So we've transitioned from that idea that we're stuck in economic purgatory to it's actually going to be a pretty good year economically. And I think that really overcame the kind of ratcheting down of Fed hopes and dreams, because it was happening for good reasons.
So in a world where it seems higher for longer in terms of rates here, what sectors screen well for you guys?
I don't think that it's any one sector that you can point to because of that. I think you've got to look at a lot of different factors. And I think sector choices are very, very difficult these days. I do think that if we can sort of get the economic tailwinds back on track, then a sector like financials makes a lot of sense. It's very positively correlated with consumer confidence trends, tends to outperform when consumer confidence is rising. These companies don't have a lot of just sort of innate growth anymore, but they tend to really be kind of viewed as the plumbing of the economy. So I think that's one area you can look at, and valuations are still very favorable. I think other than that, if you think about sort of higher for longer, you have to go to the root causes of that. And I do think inflation ultimately is a little bit higher than what we've been used to, which would point you to, I think, things like energy, materials, some of the commodity sectors.
Well, that's where I want to go. Bank of America, Lori, just published Nia Coda over in Europe. And, cute. She says, buy the French dip. It's a beef fond and Worcestershire sauce and all that. But she's going to buy the French dip with all that politics. Lori, in the American markets now, where is your French dip? Where is the opportunity of something that's pulled back and you say, well, finally I can buy?
So, if we look at valuations, I do, again, go back to energy. I go back to financials. Those are still screening very, very well on our valuation framework. And energy, while it got off to a great start to the year in terms of relative performance, has really faded recently. So that's one that we're keeping an eye on there. I think that people keep looking at small caps. I'm sort of sticking on the sidelines with those for now. But, we have noticed that if you look at the funds flow data, you're starting to see passive money come back into the small cap space recently, if you look at the latest DPFR data. So I think that's an area to watch. But frankly, I'm just not convinced that it's going to really be able to take off in a sustainable way until the economic tailwinds are back and until you get the cuts in sight.
Quickly, I saw over the weekend you survived an interview with Josh Brown. You survive all that? Were they nice to you?
It was a lot of fun. I'd never done that show before, but they were, and I
Yeah.
know Josh a little bit from over the years, but it was really an enjoyable experience. They do a great job.
Check it out on Twitter. It's a nice interview with lengthy interview with Lori Calvasina. Really smart as well with Josh Brown. Saw that over the weekend. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The first debate is just 3 days away between President Biden and former President Trump. The president has been at Camp David through the weekend preparing. Pangea policy founder Terry Haynes says the president needs to overperform on the CNN stage.
The bar is a little higher for him to come in, and do what I call the frame, show that he's up to the job and show that he's the kind of kinder, gentler, centrist, safer pair of hands, as the English would say, compared to Trump.
As for Trump, Terry Haynes with Pangea Policy says he needs to convince voters that he can make things better with the economy and at the border. Haynes was on Bloomberg Surveillance. Our coverage of the CNN presidential debate begins this Thursday night at 8 p.m. Wall Street time with a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and television. Today marks 2 years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, a decision that opened the door for many states to pass legislation restricting abortion access. In a statement, President Biden, as he has done before, blames former President Trump for the Supreme Court majority that he says, quote, ripped away the fundamental freedom for women to access the health care they need and deserve. Trump over the weekend again taking credit for appointing the 3 justices who helped overturn Roe v. Wade. Meanwhile, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden was in Pittsburgh yesterday speaking at a political rally.
He doesn't know that when our bodies are on the line, when our daughters' futures are at stake, we are immovable and we are unstoppable.
The anniversary comes more than a week after the Supreme Court rejected a challenge to mifepristone, keeping the abortion drug available. Millions of Americans sweated through a scorching weekend as temperatures soared across the U.S., while residents were rescued from floodwaters that forced evacuations across the Midwest. The governor of South Dakota said that one person died there during flooding. Iowa's governor declared a disaster for 21 counties. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much, Paul. I love what you said about the beach in New Jersey being cold. And I thought Rob Carolyn has really been balanced about this. I don't know what to make about the tangible heat that's out there, other than the simple observation it's early this year.
Yeah, that's what I think a lot of folks you talk to out on the street, they feel like, okay, we get heat waves, but do we get them in June? And how common is that? It just feels a little bit early, and it's been pronounced, and it's been really troublesome for a lot of folks.
Axios has a chart out this morning. Thank you, Andrew Friedman, for this average temperature likelihood for July 2024. There's a bullseye where Michael Barr lives.
Exactly. Yeah.
I feel wanted and loved.
All you need to know is Denver in a circle that's like out to Grand Junction, that kind of circle thing. And a bullseye on Michael Barr's house up to New Hampshire and down to western North Carolina.
It's just,
I mean, that's July.
Yeah, exactly.
It's coming.
Yeah, so we got a little bit of a break, towards the end of the week we're going to be down in the 70s, so that'll feel a lot better for a lot of folks. So we'll just have to get there.
Enjoy it while you can. Michael Barr, the heat bullseye pointed at the Barr household. Markets, we're open here in 15 minutes. Bloomberg surveillance.
24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are mixed this morning. We have NASDAQ futures down 0.3%. S&P futures down 0.1%. Dow futures up 0.1%. We have the 2-year yield 4.74%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.25%, and that is little changed as well. A few companies in the headlines. We talked about Apple. Yeah, it's been hit with this fresh EU warning over allegedly illegal practices on the App Store that could lead to some more fines. Their shares are little changed. Then the Wall Street Journal reporting Apple has held talks with Meta about integrating Meta's generative AI model into Apple Intelligence. We have Meta shares up about 0.5%. And some news on the retirement front. Vanguard says record contribution rates for 401k accounts continued into 2023, but there were still signs of financial stress. You had the percentage of those taking hardship withdrawals. Well, that hit a record 3.6%, the biggest percentage to avoid home foreclosures and evictions. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. The silly season starts Tuesday in our very short campaign. French, UK.
Yeah, that's how you do it,
32
Tom.
days.
What are we doing?
Henrietta Trace is aged, watching this campaign. She joins us right now, one of our favorite people in Washington, really acute with Veda Partners as well. Henrietta, Greg Cordy with Bloomberg has a brilliant article on the complete total crapshoot, that's the word they use, of Nevada. I'm looking at 538, which is iconic, and I got 4,000 polls at 538. Does Henrietta Trace believe in polls?
I very much believe in polls. I also believe that Nevada is a red state. I have been wrong on that for like 3 straight cycles now, which is painful, but I think it's time for Nevada to go the way that it really obviously is telling us consistently in the polls that it wants to go, which is to become a red state. I mean, the Reid machine has been incredible. Jackie Rosen continues to outperform her Republican challenger in the state, but Biden's underwater, and Hillary Clinton was underwater. Trump has been ahead there for years. I would be really surprised if Nevada were able to stay blue. I think Nevada is more of a red state than North Carolina.
Are you coaching either of the 2 members of this debate?
No, I am not coaching any members of this debate.
Can you just see them? The White House calls up Miss Trace.
Right.
Please, could you come over and... I don't get it, Paul. To me, with all the rules they have about this,
I don't get it.
David Gura tried to explain it to me, and I needed a second Gura, which is like a gimlet with an onion.
Mm-hmm. Henrietta, how should we think about the debate on Thursday here? A win for either player. How are you going to approach Thursday's debate?
I think you want to start from the outset with just why are we doing it right now? I think it underlies a fundamental fear on the Democratic side that the race has been sort of really stagnant and Biden just hasn't been able to break through with Trump's viewers. So more than anything else, I think this is a battle for eyeballs. When you have, media outlets that are inordinately biased in one direction, and that is where the vast majority of Americans are getting their news from, Biden really just wants to be on the screen with Trump at the same time so he can reach the dual haters, which are 16% of the population, the independents, who are the largest portion of undecided voters. And the best way to do that is to have Trump in the room physically with them. So I think that's what we're going for right now. And it's no accident that this is Dobbs week. So I think the framing, the next couple hours after the debate, the days after the debate, are going to be just as important as the debate itself.
Joe Matthew emails in. He says, Tom, ask Henrietta about the undecided. Henrietta, right now, there's a percent that's certain Biden. There's a percent that's certain Trump. How much is in the middle that they're really talking to in this debate?
This is the entire ballgame. The undecided population is disproportionately an independent, young female voter. These are also minority voters, Black and Latino voters. These are effectively Democratic incumbencies or Democratic constituencies that are wildly opposed to both of these men. A lot of them, 10.5%, are going to RFK Jr. But again, the undecideds are disproportionately young, independent women. It's actually double the amount of young, independent men. So I do think that this is a group that is traditionally a Democratic base. That's why my forecast is 60% that Biden wins, is because the people who are undecided now are going to migrate back to their natural resting place once we get to November. The way to think about RFK Jr., who's another big problem for both candidates in this race, is that his poll numbers are not going to start dropping off materially until after Labor Day. And then even at that point, he's still going to be getting probably 8-9% in the polls. And then once you actually get to November 5th, that'll drop to about 2-3%. Even if it's 4%, that would be double what it usually is in America. So the polls are off right now by historically 9 points. And you have to ask yourself, where are those undecided voters? Who makes them up? And they are, again, independent, young female voters disproportionately by more than half of men. So this happening during abortion week is obviously critical. Right. Immigration has also declined materially as a data point that resonates with voters. It was 21% of the focus, number one focus for 21% of voters a couple months ago. Now that's down to 17%, which is roughly on par with abortion. The fact that this is happening during Dobbs week is not a mistake.
All right. So independent women are going to be a deciding factor. Isn't that just mean abortion is issue number one for them? And doesn't that break for President Biden?
Exactly. Immigration is a huge issue for them also. It's not exclusively abortion. Okay. That's not all that females focus on. But immigration is down 54% versus December. And that's the fourth consecutive monthly decline. So the issue has lost some salience. You're going to see that pick back up, especially as we get into the summer months when everybody's expecting an uptick again. Trump will certainly hammer it. We saw that after the 34 felony conviction counts. The first thing he talked about was immigration. He's going to want to keep that front and center, and those independent voters are swayed by that. But what you are really looking at is sort of your suburban female voter, your urban female voter, and those are double the amount of male voters. And the men are going to Trump. Independent men have migrated to Trump, and they're sort of sticking there, but there's only about 3% of them that are undecided. There's more like 8, 9, 10% of the women, and that's a big difference. That's the ballgame.
You know, I've got my habits, which is habits of vice president. But the fact is that, 81 and 78, is that the score here for the age of these two? Something like that. I mean, this VP, frankly, on both sides, we really have to focus on a VP that may serve, right? Or do I have that wrong?
So I've been on the road for the last 2 weeks, New York, D.C., and London, and this is the only conversation that investors really want to have. There's about a 20% odds baked into the market right now that Joe Biden will not be either on the ticket or will not be the nominee. Some expectation that it will be someone else. The default is not always that it goes to Kamala Harris. There is always a question of, would it be Gavin Newsom? Would it be Gretchen Whitmer? Would it be Michelle Obama? I get those questions in every single meeting, regardless of how informed everyone is. People just want to talk about this. So it's definitely a narrative. I think that's why the street has very low expectations compared to Trump that Biden will actually be the nominee. And of course, the base case expectation on the street is that Trump will win the election.
Henrietta, thank you so much. We got a huge response. Thank you out on YouTube for that response. Henrietta Trey's Veda Partners here. She'll be a core part of our campaign coverage as we go to November 5th as well. I mean, Paul, it's very delicate. I mean, Lisa can have an opinion, but you and I can't.
Right. Exactly.
Because
of course.
She's the independent woman out there.
She is.
She's an independent She's
lady.
the core audience.
Yes, she is.
She had core knowledge with Lisa. That was fabulous. Yeah. I learned a lot there. And again, we'll have our great coverage. Joe Matthew is scary site encyclopedia. Kaylee Lines working out of Virginia. And a guy named Gura will be in Atlanta.
Yep, okay, that's good.
As well. That's a really...
He's a real reporter.
I'm going to say this, folks. The conversation on Bloomberg Politics is going to be different than the other 47 coverages. There's going to be some really penetrating analysis, just like what you heard with Henrietta Trey's, away from the formulaic effort. I take great umbrage with the formula that's out there. This, and we'll give our best. Look for that Thursday night, 8 p.m. Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines. We got lots to do. We got to get the market open here. A huge economic week ahead. The debate Thursday, on to July. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
All right off the Acela train from Philadelphia. Prior to that, Paris, France. I mean, he covers ETFs. What's he doing trotting around the world? I mean, what's going on with this guy? Balchunas coming up.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. Now, it's a big week for economic data. Tomorrow, we get the latest read consumer confidence. Wednesday, report on new home sales. Thursday, we move on to that revised first quarter numbers on GDP. But yes, it's all about Friday when we get the PCE inflation numbers. But things are just kicking off, so let's see how we start off the new trading week. We'll start with the S&P 500. Right now, little change, down about 3 points at 5,461. We have the Dow up 0.3%, 118 points at 39,272. The NASDAQ down 0.2%, or 51 points at 17,635. All right, we'll get to the bond market now. At 4.73%, that's a 2-year yield. Little change. The yield on the 10-year, 4.25%, and that is little changed as well. We'll take a look at commodities. We have spot gold higher, $2,330 an ounce. We have Brent crude, $85 a barrel. WTI crude at $80 a barrel. At the open, want to check in with NVIDIA. Their shares down more than 2.5%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Listen to her with the gloom, the Monday gloom. I mean, Lisa comes right out.
I know.
NVIDIA. Is well. I mean, let me look at Apple here, because they're arguing with the EU. I mean, you go to the Apple store in Paris, and it's like, it's cratered, 207. Okay, right now this is a joy, and Paul, I give a speech, and it's, I mean, you were down in Nashville.
Yep.
You're in Opryland.
That's about as far as I go.
It's about as far as you go, and I'm in some Holiday Inn up in Toronto. I mean, our next guest is given a panel at the Louvre in Paris in the Richelieu wing, away from the River Seine. And, he's like near the Grand Boulevard, the department stores and Printemps and all that. What's it like to do a Bloomberg panel in the Louvre? It's very cool.
Very cool, yeah. One of the most coolest experiences I've ever had. And believe me, I've done the Holiday Inns type events. Normally, well, in the ETF world, what I'll call traditional finance, normally I'm in a hotel ballroom. It's a Hilton, it's ballroom number 3, or sometimes they name them. It's fine, it's suitable. The Louvre was really cool. It almost felt a little like a club in a way. It was kind of dark. This was a Proof of Talk was the name of the event. It was a sort of crypto-themed event. And since James Seifert on my team, have been covering the ETF launches, we sort of developed an audience of the crypto crowd to be ETF interpreters. And so my role there was to moderate a panel with other people who were ETF issuers, like 21 Shares, VanEck, and Franklin Templeton. Yeah. And Jenny Johnson was there. So they're starting to reel in some big wigs from these big asset managers to be part of these conferences. But yeah, that's why I was there. It was cool. I gave a presentation, and yeah.
Tom, when Balchunas gives a presentation, it is SRO.
Oh yeah. And you can
I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's he's a rock star. So anyways, by the time you walked over to Hermes to pick up a scarf to keep your marriage together, you're in France. BitDog went from 70,000 down to 61,000. Is Bitcoin down because of your world?
No, it looks like there's some situation with Mt. Gox and some of the coins that have to be paid out. Everybody isn't sure if those people will rebuy, or that seems to be the big news event. The ETF flows flatlined a little, but after May, they took in, I want to say, $2 to $3 billion in May. They lost a couple $100 million since, so they're still netting positive. It seems like the ETF flows have this sort of ebb and flow where it's like 2 billion in, 1 billion out, 2 billion in, 1 billion out. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Right. We're currently in a 1 step back phase, but net, you're still almost $15 billion net since they launched in January. That's the important number to watch.
Mt. Gox is a Bitcoin exchange in Shibuya, Tokyo, launched 14 years ago. It was handling 70% of buy sells, but then they ran into trouble or something.
Uh-oh. All right. So, Eric, when we talk to you, we always talk to you about the flows going into Bitcoin. But I'm looking at some of your research. We got a lot of ETFs that actually shut down. Like, they don't make it Explain to us how that happens and what's going on there.
Yeah, so the more the industry matures, right, and the core beta space is sort of taken up by Vanguard and BlackRock, and nobody's going to launch like a vanilla fund really anymore. A lot of people throw spaghetti at the wall. They try all kinds of stuff. Like there's single stock ETFs galore, and a lot of it doesn't make it. So what we've been finding more recently is that a lot of the closures are babies. They're all below 3 years old. So that tells us that issuers are more okay. Used to be a little bit of a stigma to close an ETF. Nobody cares anymore. So they throw like 20 ETFs surrounding a certain theme or strategy. And if 3 are big hits, great. And if 2 or 3 are mediocre, they'll keep them, and then they'll close 5 or 6, maybe even 10 of them. And that's the way the industry is going to go for a while. Because you really only need 1 or 2 big hits, and especially if you're launching something like leveraged single stock ETFs, they charge 1.5%. So if you can get like $1 billion into that, you're set.
Isn't that 1.5%? That's a lot.
It is a lot. But people have less fee tolerance in the hot sauce bucket. Like if your portfolio core is Vanguard, you demand cheap.
Okay.
But when you're only putting a 1% allocation, or you're in it for only a couple weeks or a couple days, expense ratio doesn't matter that much. That's why issuers like launching there.
Disclosure: the triple leveraged all cash fund ETF is not a hot sauce.
No, it's not a hot sauce.
By the way, cash yields like 5%. I feel like this is the time to launch your strategy.
Oh, no, come on. We got a gross of 16.25. We got a few fees, the things that you got to take care of, vet bill. And all that, we're net clean 12.5% interest. I got paid out last year 2 and 20 on it.
I feel like the retirees would really jump into that because
we had to shut it down.
They want more action than cash can give them. But they don't want like a lot of the downside risk
marketing plan
that the stock market has. So
stop it.
Triple leverage cash. I don't know. Whoever's listening,
So talk to us about ETF investors these days. Is institutional versus retail? Where are we today, and how has that changed over time?
Yeah. So would you consider a financial advisor retail or institutional?
Good point. I think retail.
Okay, or we'll call them a third category.
Okay.
But they're the most important. They're 70% of all ETF assets. They are the biggest consumers of ETFs. So they manage 30 trillion. So they have like a lot of the money in America. Now, 20% would probably be what I would call do-it-yourself retail. Those would be people with a Schwab account. They usually use the crazy stuff.
Okay.
Advisors tend to be pretty boring Vanguardian dividend stock ETFs. Then there's 10% I would say is institutions. Institutions tend not to use Vanguard as much, but what they like to do is use ETFs to like, if they're firing one manager who's like a European manager, they might put the money in the iShares Europe ETF for like 2 months until they find a new manager.
Really?
So they like to equitize cash with ETFs, but they don't tend to like, throw their whole portfolio into ETFs.
So what is like Capital Guardian Trust of Los Angeles? I'm just picking on them. It could be a number of others, but esteemed old line mutual fund companies, do they just make a board decision, it's over, and we go over to ETFs? How does that work?
Yeah, look, at some point you have to make a decision. Do we want to sort of like ride this gravy train, which is nice, until the bitter end and then just sell ourselves? Or do we want to be a part of the future?
So what are they doing?
They're trying to be a part of the future.
Franklin Templeton and the rest.
If you want to be a part of the future, in my opinion, you have to accept there's going to be some cannibalization. And it's a tough choice to make, especially if all your business is mutual funds. At JP Morgan, it's easier to make this decision because they have so many revenue lines. So their asset management business isn't like the end-all be-all. But if all you do is mutual funds, this is a harder choice. This is why Capital Group and some of these firms came in so late. It was a tough choice. But I give them credit. They want to be part of the future. Their ETFs tend to be cheaper than their mutual funds. So they have kind of met the ETF industry on its terms. The good news for them is the market's gone up so much. Their mutual funds are still, I think they have like $2 trillion in assets. And so they're really doing well. I mean, these asset managers, as long as the market remains up, they're doing fine. But if you want to be in the future, I think you have to go into the ETF space and lower your fees a bit.
All right, what are some of the themes? I love these thematic stuff that you and Eric, that you guys write about, Mr. Seifert. What are some of the cool themes that you've seen recently on the ETF space?
Well, I think one thing that the journal covered, which we wrote about, is what I just referred to with Tom is boomer candy. This is right now in many labs, they are trying to develop ways to help boomers stay in the market but sleep at night. So whether that's and they use flex options, so they customized options. And this is sort of like they can target your outcome. So they can say, well, we'll give you
You're killing me.
10% of the upside of the market, but we can limit your downside. Well, the first 5% you take, beyond that, you don't have to worry about.
This is so been there, done that. We're gonna Michael Barr will get to. This is too important. Haven't they learned their lessons the third cycle around?
Here's my defense of why this is doing well. In 2022, stocks and bonds both went down.
Yep.
Now in 2008, if you had TLT, it went up 35%. It totally offset your stock losses. Not in 2022. So people don't have faith that the bonds are going to help them.
I agree.
This has opened the door to these sort of structured product vehicles, and that's where we're at.
I'm a big buyer of these structured products. I don't know if that's a good thing for my guy.
Well, you know, the whole biotech industry, a lot of it is serving older people to help them live longer, sleep at night, all this stuff. It makes sense that the asset management industry would be doing the same.
Did you go to the beef bourguignon place off Rue Dauphine?
No. I can't remember where I ate. It was
Welcome to Paris. Yeah. Exactly.
It was cool though. I got to be honest. I forgot how cool Europe is. Like I hadn't been there in maybe 5 years.
You look tan and rested.
Well, I went to Florida after Europe.
Did you go to Canada?
I went to the Panhandle of Florida after France.
Oh
what
my
a
gosh.
swing!
That is a culture shock.
Yes, that's a 180 right there.
You took the nonstop de Gaulle to Pensacola.
Yeah.
Very good. Eric
There was 3 people on the flight.
We're so envious it's sick. He owns the ETF space, owning the world in national news. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Millions of Americans are preparing to mark the 2-year anniversary of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade and putting abortion access in the national spotlight, including former President Trump, who appeared to take a victory lap on the campaign trail over the weekend.
Thanks to these justices, we have also achieved what the pro-life movement fought to get for 49 years, and we've gotten abortion out of the federal government and back to the states.
While President Biden prepares in Camp David for Thursday's debate with Trump, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden was in Pittsburgh speaking at a political rally.
Women put Joe Biden in the White House. Hey, and women are going to keep him there.
Meanwhile, Planned Parenthood will spend $40 million ahead of November's elections to bolster President Biden and leading congressional Democrats. At least 15 police officers and 4 civilians are dead in an apparent coordinated attack in the southern Russian region of Dagestan. Security services say churches and a synagogue were targeted in the majority Muslim region. Bloomberg's Henry Mayer reports it's raising concerns about a new wave of homegrown religious violence in Russia.
In March, there was a major attack on a concert hall, the Crocus City, in Moscow, and the authorities blamed Ukraine, said that the Ukrainian secret services had been behind it, although Islamic State claimed responsibility for it.
Bloomberg's Henry Mayer reports Russia later did acknowledge the Islamic State was responsible. Investigators say they're still trying to determine who was behind this latest attack. Nearly 3 months after the Key Bridge collapse, the Dolly cargo ship that crashed into the bridge is leaving Baltimore for Virginia. 6 workers who were on the bridge were killed back in March. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. Stocks are open. Dow up green. We got a little bit of negative SPX. Apple maybe weighing down to the 207, down a bit as well. What do you see out there, Paul? I see Warner Brothers Discovery's got a modest bid.
No, there's nothing out there in the world of media. But I see, again, it's kind of red and green out there. A lot of economic data coming up this week, Tom, then capped off by the PCE deflator data we're going to get on Friday.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and so that'll be, that's what the smart people tell me the Fed really looks at as they try to gauge inflation and where are we. So the PCE core deflator year on year expectation is 2.6%. That would be down from 2.8% last month, and we'll keep an eye on that one there.
Not talked about enough. I've got Brent crude 85.42 and West Texas Intermediate rounded up by a nickel, $81 a barrel. It's not the depression in energy that we saw. It's come back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to get some, keep an eye on the gasoline prices.
Watching yen intervention. It has not happened. I want to make that clear. From New York City, Bloomberg surveillance.
Now, look at some local headlines making news in the tri-state area.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Right now, well, we've got red and green on the screen. The Dow leading the gains right now, up 0.2%, 95 points. S&P 500, little change, down 2 points, 5,462. We have the Nasdaq down about 0.2%, 41 points at 17,647. We have the 2-year yield at 4.74%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.25%, and that is little changed. To currencies, we have the Japanese yen 159.46 against the dollar. We'll head over to Bitcoin, down about 3% at 61,345. That is extending its drop. It was hit by this 6-day streak of outflows from U.S. ETFs from the token. Now, cryptocurrency linked companies, that's why I want to check in right now. We have Coinbase Global down more than 3.5%. We have Marathon Digital Holdings. They're getting hit too. They're lower this morning. And then we have shares of RXO up 15%. That's moving the markets after news that it's going to buy UPS's Coyote Logistics for more than $1 billion. We have shares of UPS up nearly 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. This is a joy. Paul and I just said, we want to get this guy in, but we're not doing it in the 7 o'clock hour because we're not awake.
Yeah.
Now that we're in the 9 o'clock Wall Street time hour, he's beginning his day, and our brains are actually working. Amal Dagalkar joins us now, head of global corporate Chatham Financial. I want to start with two things. Who's Chatham Financial? I think that's something we got to talk about.
Yeah, Chatham Financial is a advisory and technology services firm focused on capital markets activity. So we work with largest private equity sponsors in the world, largest companies in the world, largest real estate investors in the world, helping them manage interest rate, currency, commodity risks.
Doing derivative trades and constructing ideas to protect yourself, right?
Exactly. It's all about risk management.
You are out of Penn State, chemical engineering and economics. You're more qualified than anybody I know to talk about Newtonian frenzy, math idiocy within your world. Are we over-mathed?
Is there such a thing as being over-mathed?
Exactly. Yeah.
My daughters love math, so I don't know what that says about our parenting style.
Well, it's good. I mean, Paul, to me, there's a lot of thinking around basic, to make it simple, Gaussian distributions, and maybe that's not the real world.
I don't know. I'm looking at the Bloomberg Commodity Index, and I see it up and down and up and down. So how do you hedge in that world? So what are some of the, whether it's energy or other areas of commodities, how do you approach hedging?
Paul, I think one of the big challenges is that commodities, unlike most of the other markets, are really linked back to something physical, right? Yep. There's, not like interest rates or FX or crypto, as you were talking about earlier. So it's really challenging. One of the themes that we've seen is that companies are really reactive, though. So they start hedging once prices go up, rather than hedging when prices are a little bit more stable. And like you said, we've been bouncing around a little bit, but it hasn't been highly volatile. We broke over 80 on crude, but haven't made our way back up to the triple digits in a while.
How about when you talk to CFOs, for example, and you talk to them about, a lot of these CFOs haven't seen interest rates at this level before. They've kind of come up and were trained in a near zero or low interest rate environment. What's the conversation like these days when you say, hey, you may have to deal with these interest rates for a while here?
Well, I think it first started like most do, which is denial. Right. It's going to go back. It's going to come back down to zero. But we're seeing the market change its perception. Remember, it was 6 months ago we thought there was going to be 6 rate cuts happening this year, maybe even 7. Some people said, obviously, that's not the case. And so you have to get over denial to get to acceptance. And now what CFOs are really thinking about is, what can I do today to lower the cost of capital, lower cost of debt capital? There's some strategies they can use. And I have to prepare the business for fundamentally higher costs of capital going forward. Maybe not, 4.25 on the 10-year, but still, not back down to sub 1% rates.
I've had the honor of speaking to Myron Scholes more than a few times about the shadows of 1998. Where are the shadows now? And usually that means misapplied or underestimated risk to leverage. Where's the leverage risk right now?
I think there's a few places that you can look at, but probably the biggest one, and many of your speakers have talked about this, is the private credit market. It has grown significantly. It's an unregulated market. really allowing a lot of firms to get capital that they might not otherwise have gotten, but there are a lot, of unknowns.
Are they
in
in
the unregulated
extend
market.
and pretend right now? Are they moving out the x-axis just to wait and hope it gets fixed?
Well, the economy has been surprisingly strong, so it's been a lot better than people expected, even as rates have gone up. So generally, firms are doing pretty fine, but there's absolutely this risk that as we see this slowdown, and people have been calling for it for a long time, but as we see this slowdown and see it impact, businesses and their finances, what will these private credit firms do? And frankly, what will banks do? I mean, everyone is in the same position of navigating this impending, maybe soon to be recession.
How about the U.S. dollar? I just can't get anybody credible to give me a bear case on the dollar. So when you talk to your clients, are you saying you should be expecting this strong dollar to continue as far as they can see?
I mean, it's going to take a shock to the system that we haven't seen yet right now. There's a pretty strong thesis that the dollar will stay strong for some time, particularly when considering that we have other economies around the world that are cutting rates, and the dollar, the Fed will eventually cut rates, but we're certainly not the first mover at this point.
Yeah.
So firms are really having to get used to, especially multinationals. Again, it's another one of those acceptance points where they're just having to get used to. It's going to be a bit of a while for the strong dollar to be in place. So what can you do to navigate that environment?
I had this conversation over the weekend, and it's an honor to have it with you. Paul, Penn State invented chemical engineering, period.
Pretty good.
They figured it out there, like Paul, 1888, that far back, and they Walker wandered off to MIT and really laid the foundation for it. And I had a blistering conversation with two brats this weekend, not related to me, where they were going, yeah, but we don't want to do it. It's so hard. And I'm talking my own book here. I did aerospace. But the answer is foundational, civil, mechanical, chemical engineering. What do kids get out of it?
Oh, they get everything out of it. You learn a way to think about problems, break them down to their most simple elements, and you learn math. Back to that.
Are there enough kids going into it now? What do you hear from chemical engineering at Penn State?
There can always be more kids going into to engineering, even if that's not what you do with your life.
But Penn State has cranked out so many engineering students. I mean,
they
I heard a crazy statistic. One out of blah blah.
1 out of 10 at one point.
Yes, 1 out of 10.
Something
engineers,
like
and my son is one of them. And they're all that math geek stuff, and I don't know. It's just it's no fun. But they're good at it. I don't know. He's now doing aerospace stuff somewhere.
What do you worry about within private credit, private equity right now? What's away from Chatham Financial? What do you worry about right now?
I mean, I think the worry is if we in fact are in a recession, we get to a recession. There's a lot of extend and pretend happening on financings, and what the contagion will happen through the rest of the system, especially with the leverage that some of these firms are using. So that's really the big concern. It's unknown. I wouldn't say it's something that we should be spending too much time focused on, but certainly regulators are paying more and more attention to this.
Hugely valuable. Thank you so much. Amal Duckhacker, thank you so much with Chatham Financial. Just can't say enough about it. And they're really interesting firm. I think Chatham Financial is a name that we're going to hear a lot more about in the coming years, folks. Really, really twisted risk management on helping clients get through all this stuff. We'll have to see on that as well. The Dow's up 200 points. Where did that come from, Paul?
I don't know. We'll take it, though. I mean, it's just market wants to, move.
Well, there's a lot of gloom this weekend. I thought the gloom crew's been hiding for 2 months, and they came out and worry this, worry that. This, and then led by NVIDIA. We'll just have to see. It's going to be a huge week. I can't say.
Yep, a lot of economic. So, folks, just ECO Go on the terminal. That gives you the whole calendar, what's coming
We're
up.
doing basics. We did the Beatles, the Stones. It was all sort of poppy and blues. And then there was this wacko group, the Kinks.
Yep.
And they were different.
Don't ever set me free. I always want to be by your side.